I think it's a very nerve-wracking time because who knows whether Intel at some point will just go, it's not really worth it. Who else is there, right?
Because they've had a really big recovery this year. Their share price up 150%.
I know, and I think a lot of that's to do with government.
But it won't be to do with the RAN,
it's government support and...
Yeah, that's true, yeah. The government
underpinning it and NVIDIA and SoftBank, basically. I think a lot of it's to do with...
So it's just everyone just mucking in.
Yeah, and so... I mean, there is an argument that as you get more CPUs rolled out, you obviously need CPUs as an anchor for basic workloads, and I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
But if you take those guys out of the picture, take Intel out, take Marvell out, who else does baseband silicon? Nokia's not going to get it from Ericsson. They're not going to get it from Huawei.
Hello and welcome back to the Telecoms.com podcast. Starting a little bit late because while we were away, Iain was on holiday, someone decided to dick about with all the cameras in the studio. Pierre's had a stressy half hour getting his head around the new arrangement, but hopefully it'll come out all right. So we haven't done one for 3 or 4 weeks. The final one we were going to do before your holiday, all the trains went mad. I was literally sitting on a train in Hitchin, waiting for it to go, and it was hot as fuck again, like it was yesterday. Jesus Christ. This has been the hottest summer ever, hasn't it?
Yeah. It probably has, yeah.
Yeah.
France is on fire.
Front Bordeaux's on fire.
I think there's Crete now. Crete's the latest.
That might be a good. Might be a good opportunity to go down there and get some cheap wine.
Suffolk's on fire.
Suffolk's on fire. Right.
In the news this morning, there's like a huge fire raging in Suffolk now.
Suffolk doesn't make wine, so I don't care.
Okay. It's part of your own country, though, Scott.
Yeah, well, half my family's from Suffolk.
There you are. Your family name is from Suffolk.
I was being facetious. In case people know, my family name's from Cambridgeshire. Oh. A village called Over in Cambridgeshire has got Baceno gravestones.
East Anglia.
But my mum's side of the family, Lacey Scott, are from Bury St Edmunds.
Right.
So it's funny that my mum's maiden name has Scott in it. Maybe that's why they called me that. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, so and so we were sitting there baking on this train, and the driver went, "Yeah, something wrong with the train. Everyone just get off."
Right.
And I was messaging you two, going, "Okay, there's no one coming 15 minutes. I might just be 5 minutes late, but we should be good to go." And then they just cancelled that one as well, and cancelled all the ones after that. So it was like game over, which is a shame because we had to let down a guest as well.
Yeah, he was very gracious about it.
He was. But there we are. So it's probably been not short of a month, is it? By the time we publish this.
Yeah.
So I hope you haven't missed us too much, beloved audience. We've missed you. And it's just the two of us, which is quite handy after a bit of time, so we can catch up.
Yeah.
We obviously haven't seen each other for a little while. So in terms of opening bollocks, I haven't been up to that much, but you've been on holiday. Where you been and how was it, Iain?
I've been to Slovakia.
For a change.
As people who are regular listeners will be surprised to hear.
Yeah.
Which is the normal destination in the summer, only because my wife's from there.
That's where Mrs. Light Reading is from.
Mrs. Light Reading's from Slovakia, so it's like the only time to see her family, really. We don't really go over there at Christmas.
No. And it looks, you're sending some photos, it looks absolutely picturesque.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I mean, I do my bit for the Slovak Tourist Board. It is a really beautiful country, certainly in the north, in the Tatras Mountains, which is
towards Poland.
Yeah, it's literally on the border with Poland. I mean, I think her village is like 5 miles south of that border. And the Tatras is a bit of the Carpathians. It's actually the highest part of the Carpathian mountain range. So you have peaks in Slovakia that are 2,700 meters above sea level, I think. So it's pretty. I think Ben Nevis is like 1,100.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty.
So it's
pretty high. Yeah,
it's a bit of mountain action. You don't hear much about the Carpathians.
No, well,
the Alps gets all the press.
Carpathians only getting mentioned usually in the context of Dracula and...
Isn't that a TV show, Keeping Up with the Carpathians?
Very good. Pierre hasn't lost a step in the last month.
I'm here all week.
That's pretty good. I like that. Yeah. No, it's not, normally it's like books about Dracula in Transylvania.
Is Transylvania...
Yeah, they go really well. It's obviously down Hungary, Romania way, but they extend. They kind of curve down through towards Romania, the Carpathians.
But that's where you get sinister mountain lairs.
Yeah, and interestingly, for people who are fans of Dracula and the original Dracula film Nosferatu, recently remade, but the
originally made back in like the 20s or 30s.
German film, 1930s, Max Schreck with his bald head and his long fingernails.
Yeah.
The castle in that film, which you see frequently if you've watched a movie, perched on this rock looking very ominous. It's like the classic sort of like Dracula castle, is about 10 miles away from Magda's village. So the district's called Arava Castle.
I'm just looking at it on Google Maps.
Arava Castle.
So what's the biggest sort of larger town that I might see on Google Maps?
I mean, the nearest big town to it's probably Dolny Kubin. Which is south of the village, but the nearest big city is actually Krakow in Poland. It's about 60 miles away, so we must fly there rather than go to Bratislava. And it is a really stunning area. Like if you're into hiking, if you're into skiing, it's great in the winter for skiing.
It does get proper alpine sort of snow level
regularly. It's always good enough to go skiing there. If you're a good skier, then it's a great area to go.
And it's got a border with Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right at the other end of Slovakia, though. That's you're going to go to Košice and that sort of, yeah. I mean, it's not a massive country, so the border's not that far.
Oh, so your bit is, it's on the border with Poland, but more the western end of that.
If you look where Krakow is, and you basically take your eyes directly south without deviating, you're pretty much en route to where I was.
Okay, yeah.
West Tatras.
I can see on the Google Maps with this satellite overlay, I can see some white peaks there, so that confirms
it's very nice.
Your mountain anecdote.
Yeah, and I mean, there's brown bears there if you want to go spotting brown bears.
Right.
You get advised if you're on your own there, wanting to go for a little walk, as I do, don't go out on your own because the bears are a bigger problem than they used to be. People just used to shoot them, but you can't.
That's one solution, isn't it?
You're not allowed to. I mean, I don't have a gun anyway.
That's to say. Go out looking like fucking Mad Max on your walk.
And you're not allowed to now. You can't just go and shoot bears willy-nilly because they're sort of protected species and everything. But as a consequence of that, there's more of them. Yeah. And your chances of like coming a cropper are higher than they used to be. So.
I know and brown bears, I mean, the big brown bears are grizzlies, aren't they?
Yeah, grizzlies are slightly different species, I think.
Yeah, but it's in the brown bear
they're big. They are big. I mean, I've seen one running down on camera, running through the centre of Liptovsky Mikuláš, which is a village nearby, and they're big.
They're just basically, in terms of how they behave around humans, they're almost like massive foxes. I mean, they'll come into conurbations looking for food, won't they?
So if you have, everybody's got these log cabins out in the outskirts of the village and going up into the mountains. And it's really nice to stay in. I've stayed in one before, a friend of Magda's. But if you go and eat outside and you have a barbecue, you have to make sure that you clean everything up, because if you don't, you'll get up in the middle of the night and there'll be bears there eating it, and then they'll come back. That's the problem.
Well, and then they might just think, I wonder if there's some food in your house.
And then they're coming into the house, exactly, and all that sort of stuff. So,
Yeah, you got to watch out. But you've never encountered a bear?
I haven't seen, no, my father-in-law has. A couple of times, I think.
Shit me up.
Yeah, I mean, normally they're okay. They don't go for you or anything.
Well, the dodgy one is if you're unlucky enough to be near a mother with cubs.
Cubs is the problem,
especially if you're between the mother and the cubs. They'll beat the shit out of you.
Yeah, that's the danger. I think if they're not with cubs, then you're probably okay. But I still don't know if
this feels like a Joe Rogan episode. Rogan absolutely loves going on about animals and scary animals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And is the capital of Slovakia Bratislava?
Yeah, which is miles away from where
that's right near Vienna.
Yeah, I think Bratislava is a really good place to go to if you're trying to get. You can basically do a trip around sort of 3 or 4 countries in Bratislava really easily. You can go to the Czech Republic from there dead easily. You can go to Austria
and Hungary.
You can do a little sort of circular route and take in 4 countries.
So I'm guessing Slovakia was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire back in the day.
It was part of the Hungarian Empire before the Austro-Hungarian Empire was formed. So like for about 1,000 years. So there was a thing called the Great Moravian Empire, which is when the kind of Slovaks and the Czechs were at their kind of peak back in around about like 1,100 or something, and then the Slovak part got absorbed into Hungary, and the Czech part fell under the influence of Austria, and then eventually they were both run by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So until like my wife's discovered that she has relatives who live in America, which is odd because my my son lives there now, and all of a sudden he's got this sort of extended family.
Oh, it's the Slovakian, what do they call it when loads of people clear off? Diaspora.
Yeah, so they went, apparently, I didn't know this until we were in Slovakia this time round, but they moved over there in about 1909, that part of the family. It's like the great-great-grandfather or whatever, basically, from our perspective.
Cool.
But the country didn't exist then. It was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire still.
And Bratislava was one stop down the Danube from Vienna.
Yeah.
And then
and Bratislava is really nice, but it's very small. Like you wouldn't necessarily need to spend more than a day or two there to see most of it, I don't think.
Danube keep going on down Danube a bit more, get to Budapest eventually.
Yep.
There's a lot going on Danube.
Yeah. No, if no one's been to that part of the world, this is a Telecoms.com podcast, not a travel podcast, but I highly recommend it.
Okay.
Yeah, I really do. It's really, really
That's all right. Now I get to get you back for daring to deviate from 100% telecoms. Okay. Yeah, I don't have anything to report. I've just been around being hot, doing lots of barbecues. Except my barbecue's got busted and the thing at the bottom, like where the ashes fall through, has just rusted off. And now I've just got chicken wire there.
One of those dome-shaped ones?
No, it's like a cylinder.
Right.
But the thing about that is now you've got much more air coming through the barbecue.
Right.
So when I get the coals going, I've got to cook everything in about 15 minutes. I've burned the shit out of my hands because the thing's like the surface of the sun. So we get lots of black on the outside, pink on the inside. So I think it's time for a new Barbie.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, grab a beer. We'll see how cold it is. It's completely out of ice. I always buy ice to put in our Yeti that Danielle Rios, DR, to her friends, bought us years ago, and we're now using these branded Yeti koozies, as Americans call them. Again, courtesy of Danielle. But I always buy ice, and just everyone, all three supermarkets I walked past on the way in were out of ice. So my bright idea, out of desperation, in fact, all of the Sainsbury's freezers were knackered. You couldn't get anything there. So I bought a bag of mixed frozen veg.
Which is better than nothing.
From Tesco's. Yeah, it's a bit more expensive than the ice, about £3.50 just for a bag of mixed frozen veg.
Well, you can eat it though, can't you, afterwards?
I'm not going to.
No. Frozen veg, no.
So that's, I don't know, has it made that at all cold?
It's okay. It's a bit below room temperature, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll do.
It's going to have to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's crack on. So you've been away for a little while, but you've sort of, it looks like you wrote some stuff in advance, or maybe you were naughty and did writing on holiday.
I worked on holiday for a couple of days.
Tut. And I saw from just clicking on your byline that, as I would expect of you, you've gone large on, Nokia's come up with another round of announcements to do with AI RAN, which, to remind anyone to whom it's not obvious, their commitment to AI RAN was very much cemented by Nvidia chucking them $1 billion last year. So they're all in on that, and that's fine. It doesn't mean that it's not a good idea, but it does mean that it's the onus is on them to sort of cheerlead it.
Yeah.
And articulate the case for it. And so you've looked into that quite a lot. So I think we'll go big on that. We might mention their quarterlies, which were just about a week or so ago as well.
I did those as well, so I can comment on that.
Cool. And then I've been going big. I'm almost tempted, perhaps just to antagonize you, Ian, to come up with a semi-regular segment on the pod called AI Dystopia Corner.
Right.
Some pods have more structure, where they have little bits that they commit to every week.
Like a bit like an opening bollocks.
Yeah, exactly. A Dystopia Corner. Just because I've written about it quite a lot. And it's, some of it has been me being creative.
Yeah.
And like stringing together a few bits to make a narrative. Some of it's just been straight reporting on stuff where just the news itself does all the dystopian heavy lifting for me. So I think, and it's always fun to chat about that stuff anyway. So I think we'll do that. And then, and
there's a bit of telecom in that as well.
There is a bit, actually. And I think you recently wrote about, AI related job cuts in telecoms. So
yeah, some of them are AI related. Yeah.
And then if we've got time, you also wrote up a thing about a GSMA going that having to strip out Huawei's a really expensive pain in the arse.
Yeah.
And as soon as I read that GSMA announcement, we didn't cover it, so I'm kind of leaning on you, but I did read it.
Yeah.
Or at least I read the press release. I thought, our mate Strandy's not going to like that.
Yeah.
And then, like, within hours, there was this big old Strand report had come out tearing it to bits.
I thought it was an unusually strong position for the GSMA to take on something that's obviously going to upset some of their members. This is the thing. I mean, they're obviously more about representing the telcos than the vendors. But your money from a certain big show comes partly from a couple of big European players.
It's almost like the biggest spender at that show might be one of the people involved in this report.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, this is the other thing. How independent is a report?
Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying anything.
I did say that in my first paragraph.
Fair enough. But Huawei rents out an entirety of a hall. Even Ericsson doesn't do that. They do about half.
Huawei had nothing to do with the writing of the report. I believe that. And
I don't think I believe that too.
I mean, that's what they've said.
No, but what we're querying is the incentives.
Yeah, exactly.
To write such a thing.
Yeah. We can talk about that.
That doesn't mean it's not true.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, in fact, I think it's generally known that Huawei offers really good bang for buck.
Yeah.
And obviously it's known that having to strip out or rip and replace, to use the vernacular, before a piece of kit has reached its natural obsolescence has a cost implication. So all those points are valid. But anyway, I won't preempt that. We'll make sure we make time for that at the end. So why don't we start by throwing a ball to you?
Yeah.
Why don't we start with the AI RAN stuff as communicated by Nokia? Why don't you sort of tee that up, summarize it, and then we'll get into it.
Well, it's the announcement itself, I don't think had any huge surprises in it. I was almost a little bit underwhelmed. I was kind of hoping for a bit more juice.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was your reaction to it when you saw it, but it was...
It seemed like a sort of reiteration of their existing position.
Yeah, do you know what I think happened? So here, reading between the lines and from certain people that I've been talking to, if you've noticed, Ericsson's been putting out quite a bit of stuff over the last few weeks about spectral efficiency improvements through their version of AI RAN. So AI RAN, as defined by Nokia, is very much about this, as you just mentioned, this alliance they've got with NVIDIA.
Yeah.
Which came in, I think it was like September last year.
And NVIDIA's interest is obviously, ultimately,
selling
they'd
GPUs.
love it if their silicon was in the RAN.
Yeah. So from Nokia's perspective, AI RAN is very much synonymous with the idea of putting a GPU, which is obviously NVIDIA's chip, into the radio access network and using that for a mixture of RAN software, basically, your baseband, the software part of the RAN would run on those GPUs, but you can also use the GPUs for sort of AI inferencing, the running of not large language models, but sort of inferencing models at the edge of the network. That's the kind of AI RAN in a nutshell.
And inferencing in the AI vernacular.
Well, it's just running a model, not training a model.
Yeah, it's running
a trained model.
It's deriving insight from a model that's already been trained. Yeah.
But those models don't have to. The point is, those models don't have to relate to the RAN. They can be.
Indeed.
You sell the capacity that you have at the edge of the network, much as a cloud company would provide services to other organisations that want to do training of large language models or use inferencing models. Could telcos come into the picture and do this stuff?
And there's this sort of edge compute distributed intelligence thing that we spent a pod digging into when NVIDIA announced this AI grid.
Yeah, exactly.
Concept. So there's lots of different sort of aspects to the concept of AI RAN.
Yeah, totally. So that's what it is from Nokia's perspective. Ericsson also talks a lot about AI RAN. You go through those press releases and you sit on calls with them and you go through earnings stuff.
AI.
Yeah, they do. And they also, I don't think they always put a hyphen in. They have a different sort of way.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Do you hyphen? I think we just separate word it.
Well, I think I don't know what the convention is.
We don't really have a house style at Telecoms.com.
Well, I'm wondering what Nokia's and NVIDIA's house style is, which I think is always to hyphenate it.
Okay.
But anyway, Ericsson talks a lot about AI RAN as well. The difference with Ericsson, as I sort of got into this a lot earlier in the year to try and figure it out, really, because they don't want to go, we're not at all interested in NVIDIA. They don't want to make out that they have nothing to do with NVIDIA and they're really not interested in making use of GPUs.
Yeah.
But essentially, the Ericsson version of AI RAN is not about using those GPUs to do AI 4 RAN. You get these different categories, and the AI 4 RAN, which is I think the bit that's this announcement was very much about that, and that's the part of it that I think is more interesting to us. Is about you take the algorithms that get written that do the baseband software, which have been produced for 40 years or whatever by people and refined over that period of time. You substitute AI for some of that to realise some kind of improvements because AI can do a better job of it. It's the idea.
Just more powerful computing.
More powerful.
Stands to reason if it relies on computing, then more computing in theory would make it better.
Yeah, well, that's the bit where I would push back on whether a GPU is an advantage over. So Ericsson's saying you can run these models which use AI on custom silicon. You don't need a GPU to do it. And most of the experts that I've talked to about this, who are impartial, not the ones who are kind of affiliated with either Nokia or Ericsson, would agree with that point. That you're not running a large language model.
Exactly.
You don't need something that has that amount of horsepower to put a fairly small
it's
AI.
Parallel processing. So parallel processing turns out really handy for training.
Sure, but
LLM.
But CPUs have parallel processing these days. They have vector processing on them. You can do that on custom silicon.
Okay, but I presume they're still not as good at it as GPUs are.
Sure, but the point is you don't need the horsepower. The kind of chips that you're selling to, the reason that these chips took off in the training of large language models in cloud data centers was that they provide so much power that the amount of parameters that goes into these large language models, you're talking a billion trillion numbers. You can't do that in the radio access network because you run into latency problems. There's a thing called a time interval, transmission time interval. TTI is the abbreviation for it, which means the number of parameters that you have in the radio access network when you're doing the baseband software has to be limited by the transmission time interval. If it goes over that, someone's moved before the signals, basically. You're running into signaling issues, basically.
Okay.
And the argument is, and as I say, the impartial people I've talked to about this agree, is that you don't need a GPU. The amount of horsepower that you would get with a less powerful chip is good enough to do those sorts of AI models.
Okay.
Now, I don't want to take a strong position on it, but that's the difference.
We're just the messengers.
That's the difference between the kind of Ericsson and the Nokia argument on this, is that Ericsson's very much of a position that we can do anything we need to do when it comes to AI 4 RAN on the custom silicon
the baseband
products.
stuff.
Yeah, the baseband.
And does that include spectral efficiency?
Exactly, yeah. Spectral efficiency, like fiddling around with things like channel estimation, like boosting bandwidth.
Because that's one thing I understand ever since I first started hearing about concepts like beamforming.
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing.
So, because I understand that as frequencies, as you get to higher frequency, the propagation characteristics of spectrum deteriorate.
Yeah.
But you can, to some degree, compensate for that deterioration through clever computing. Yeah. Such as directing the beam, which is beamforming. Yeah. And other bits of cleverness. Yeah. So I can see why compute has a big role to play.
Beamforming is one of the things that comes into the whole AI 4 RAN picture, that you can make beamforming improvements by introducing some AI into it and machine learning, rather than doing it in a kind of conventional human written algorithm way.
Yeah.
And Ericsson is very insistent on the fact that they can do all this on their existing silicon products, as well as their virtual RAN stuff. So they have an agreement in a similar way, or not quite the same, because they certainly haven't taken a big investment from Intel, but in a similar way to Nokia's partnership with NVIDIA, Ericsson has an older arrangement with Intel for virtual RAN, which is about using, it's very, very simple, about using kind of chips that were not originally designed to do RAN compute. They're kind of general purpose processors. They come from the IT world, take those and run RAN software on it. And Ericsson's argument is that you can do a lot of this AI RAN stuff on those CPUs that it gets from Intel, or it's custom silicon and that you don't need the GPUs. So that's the difference in the strategy. What Nokia came out with, the thing that that we're talking about, this update that they came out with like 1.5, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, is sort of they promised products last year when they first took this investment from NVIDIA, this $1 billion investment. I think it was in September. That's when they kind of laid out the roadmap for this. We're going to be announcing products next year. They'll go into commercial trials late in 2026. Then the idea is in 2027 you can actually get those out into commercial networks. And they've got a few operators that are kind of very keen, that sound very keen on doing this and experimenting with it and seeing what kind of advantages they might get from using Nokia and this sort of GPU approach, as opposed to doing things in the kind of Ericsson way. And the leading ones would probably be T-Mobile US. I think Indosat in Indonesia is quite big on it. You've got Elisa, I think, in Europe. There's a few players that are kind of, that seem to be kind of key partners for Nokia in all of this. And they basically announced the products that they're going to launch. So they've got this, the key thing for me, the one that's most interesting, is this GPU card that you basically put into existing equipment. So they've got these, they call them AirScale chassis, but that's basically like their appliance for baseband. You've got your radio and you've got your kind of where your baseband's done.
Just like a little server rack.
It's like a server rack, basically. It's like a server rack with slots at the back. You know, you put your kind of baseband card in there. And the idea is that they wanted to be able to introduce a GPU into that so that people, because there's a lot of these things that are deployed today, and that way operators can come along and take advantage of AI RAN on these GPU cards without having to swap other stuff out. They can keep the same cabling and power envelope and keep the same chassis, not change, but basically not change anything apart from putting in this card and not using the card that's there at the moment, which would be one that's based on Marvell Technologies silicon, like not a particularly well-known player maybe outside.
I'd say
it's reasonably well known. It's reasonably well known, but that's been like Nokia's baseband partner for several years now, since the kind of like dawn of 5G. And what Nvidia had to do is, obviously, just talking about this, they can't give them a GPU that's the sort of thing they sell to Amazon that goes into a cloud data center and is training large language models. Apparently, it would just sort of melt the
it's just too full on.
It's just really powerful. It's like I talked to Pallavi about this when I was on holiday, and she was saying we can't have anything that goes
funny
outside.
Attitude to holidays, my friend.
Yeah, but she was saying we can't have anything that goes outside this power envelope that we have with Marvell, because if we did, the AirScale chassis can't support it.
And then the whole point of it being this easy hot swap thing would be negated. You get to get a whole new bit of kit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they've basically scaled, to my understanding, they've kind of scaled down the GPU. And that this is what goes into the back of the AirScale chassis. There are two other products as well. So there's one that's like, there's this idea that you'd use a common off-the-shelf server, so it's something that might be done by Dell, but you have NVIDIA chips going into that, and you could do it that way. It looks like more of a kind of Cloud RAN style deployment, but obviously entails some hardware replacement. And then there's this purpose-built appliance, like a new appliance. I can't remember what they're calling that, but I mean, the attraction of that is that then you're not constrained by the power envelope.
And you can have the dog's bollocks.
You can have the dog's bollocks, yeah. So if it does turn out to be the case, if these analysts who say you can do whatever NVIDIA is talking about on custom silicon, because you can't have really advanced models, you can't have models with loads of parameters. If that turns out to be bullshit, and actually having a really powerful GPU does help you to realize some improvements on AI, then this kind of...
You future-proofed yourself.
They call it a pizza box format, don't they? Because it looks like...
I hadn't heard that, actually.
Have you not heard that expression, like a pizza box appliance? Because it looks like it's sort of... They're that sort of shape, basically, like your Pizza Hut thing, So there's these three products. They're going into trials this year, and then the idea is next year, that's when they're hoping that sales will start to come. And obviously there's some optimism within Nokia that this could, I guess, win them back some market share if all this becomes very compelling. But there's also quite a bit of skepticism about whether this is the right approach for the company to be taking, because there's still these concerns about the key thing about the RAN, the radio access network, is that you don't want overly powerful chip. You don't want a huge amount of energy consumption at those sites. It kind of destroys your business model, basically. The whole thing has been about keeping energy consumption down. That's always been one of the priorities for telcos. So if there is any suggestion at all that these, that this GPU-based approach is is too costly, that it's too expensive, and that you can't offset that through some of these AI models that are being deployed on those chips, that they're going to be no better than what Ericsson's doing on its custom silicon, then it could be, I'm not saying it's going to be, but it could be a disaster for Nokia. On the other hand, if it turns out that
it's a bit of a bet.
It's a real gamble. It's like, we'll see. Justin's Cotard's coming. I think one of my interpretations of this, to get to the sort of dynamics of the industry and where the whole thing's going, is this isn't a good market to be in at the moment. Just radio access network market. If you look at
been flat for ages, going to be flat for ages.
It's been declining even for ages. So if you look at figures from Omdia, which is a sister company to us, and one of the only two companies I think that does this sort of stuff, that does the sort of forecasting of the size of the radio access network products market, the other being Dell'Oro. They're the kind of two sort of gold standards, aren't they, really? They were saying revenues in, I think 2022, that whole market generated about 45 billion, which is, you look at that in the context of what Nvidia is making in revenues from GPU sales. It's pretty small. It's a fairly small market, radio access networks. It's big for our sector, but in the context of AI and all the money that's being thrown into that, it's actually quite a small opportunity. And it's come down since then. I think last year it was 30, so it's dropped by 10 billion in a few years. It's 35 billion last year. The outlook is flat, as you just said. It's like not a growing market.
Yeah.
And we've had this push by, there's been all this geopolitical stuff going on at the same time. We're going to come to some of this later, like countries saying you can't use Huawei anymore because it's a security threat. Mm-hmm. Which means operators are then left with, in a market that's gone through a huge amount of consolidation over a 20-year period. It used to be sort of 7 or 8 baseband, radio companies. There's now 3 big ones, basically. There's 5 that account for something like 95% of the market. It's Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, ZTE, and Samsung. And
we're not allowed Huawei and ZTE.
So if we're not allowed Huawei and ZTE, Samsung's very, very small. Like, there's still concerns about Samsung. The UK did a lot of experimentation with Samsung through Vodafone 3. And everybody was thinking that's the company they're going to go with for a huge part. And then they went, no, let's go with Nokia instead and Ericsson. So
it's obviously a fucking hard market to break into. If Samsung's struggling to do it.
Exactly.
With all its heft and expertise and all that.
Yeah, and some of those other companies that are smaller than Samsung and don't have all its heft and expertise and don't have a big phone business and don't have a big semiconductor business to kind of prop up what you're doing and fund that, what you're trying to get going, have got out of it. So Mavenir is one of them, Parallel Wireless. There's various companies that have really, really struggled. And so it's kind of thwarted the ambitions of these telcos that were saying, we want more competition to compensate for the fact that Huawei and ZTE aren't there. Yeah. And we don't want to just be left with Ericsson and Nokia. But even after all of this, it's really, really tough business for those two companies. The two Nordic companies are in a really tough spot. And the one that's really struggled on the RAN side is Nokia. Yeah. So they lost
for a variety of reasons.
For a variety of reasons, but the really big ones are 2020. They lost a deal with Verizon to Samsung, kind of replaced them in 5G. And 2023, December, they lost a deal with AT&T to Ericsson. And the US market basically is where Western vendors have made a lot of their profits. That has always been a big, it's where you generate a lot of your gross profit.
It's where there's better margin.
Better margins. And they're massive operators, obviously. It's done at a scale that doesn't happen in smaller European markets. So trying to compensate for that is almost impossible.
Yeah, exactly. One deal with AT&T and Verizon or T-Mobile is equivalent to 10 deals in Europe.
Totally. Yeah. And there's very few other markets where you can kind of achieve the same kind of scale. China would be one of them. Unfortunately, China, just as Europe's been trying to squeeze the Chinese vendors out of Europe, China's done the same thing. It's basically the market share of those two companies has come down to, you were at the same press conference I was at last year in Oulu, where Justin Hotard and Tommy Wheater, while he was still there, left Nokia now, was saying we're at 3% with Ericsson combined for market share, which is piddling.
And they
obviously.
were lobbying for stronger action against Chinese vendors.
Exactly, and we can talk about all of that a bit later,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. But the point is, after losing those deals in America, not being able to kind of compensate through China or other big markets, Nokia's had a massive profitability problem, and as a consequence, they've had to cut a lot of jobs. They've had to look for cost-saving opportunities. They were never really in the kind of custom silicon game in the same way that Ericsson was anyway. So Ericsson has this big division called Ericsson Silicon, where they design the products that support their baseband software. They don't manufacture it, obviously. All that would be done by people like TSMC and Intel, but they have a bigger role on the actual design of custom silicon than I think it's fair to say than Nokia has.
Well, they used to talk it up. I remember years ago they were talking about this thing called Reef Shark.
Yeah, so Reef Shark, there's been various iterations of Reef Shark, but even with Reef Shark, it was never quite the same. So their original partner for Reef Shark was Intel. Yeah. They were let down by Intel on the design of custom silicon.
That was one of the things that contributed to their troubles.
So this is going back before the whole Samsung debacle, but they were kind of let down by Intel on the design of custom silicon. That's Reef Shark 1.0.
This was early 2018 they launched Reef Shark. Yeah.
So Reef Shark 2.0.
Oh, by the way, on my Google, Telecoms.com comes up just above light reading.
Oh.
When I Google Reef Shark Nokia.
Reef Shark 2.0, I think, was their FPGA strategy when they had been let down by Intel on the design of custom silicon, and they had to make quite a quick pivot to something else. That proved to be not very good because the FPGAs turned out to be quite expensive. It hurt their margins. They were deemed not competitive. And then what they did after that was they started to move away from Intel completely, as well as the other FPGA partner, which would have been Xilinx, now owned by AMD.
Correct.
And they went heavily in with Marvell Technology.
Yeah.
And so it's quite a different relation. It's quite a different modus operandi from the one that Ericsson had.
So Ericsson's a bit more self-reliant.
Ericsson's a bit more self-reliant, a bit more autonomous. The only other company that does anything like that, by the way, in the world at the moment is Huawei. Unsurprisingly, I guess.
Yeah.
They've got
their own silicon scenario. Is it all called Hisense, their silicon?
Yeah, High Silicon, isn't it?
High Silicon
is something else.
Hisense.
Hisense is another company, yeah.
We'll find out
so they've got this relationship with Marvell Technology. Now, I think that even doing custom silicon,
it's a white goods.
White goods,
maker.
Okay.
Probably
washing
Chinese.
Machines.
Yeah, that's
Chinese make TV and fridges and stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
So
I had to know.
So they've had this relationship with Marvell Technology on the design of custom silicon. The big concern about doing custom silicon, which this will, like lots of analysts, people like Joe Madden and Earl Lum will talk to you about this, is in a shrinking market, like 45 billion in revenues 2022, 35 billion last year. These chip costs are enormous, Developing those chips, the amount of investment that goes into it is really substantial. And then if you're selling that to one player, like Marvell's basically supporting Nokia, because the other customer they had was Samsung, which only has a very small share of the market anyway, about 5%, and they've very much gone down the vRAN route with Intel, so they're really sort of moving away from Marvell anyway. They've only got business through Nokia. It's lost deals with Verizon. It's lost deals with AT&T.
Is it worth the fucking
Is it worth
bother?
the hassle? Exactly. Yeah. Do they themselves make a profit? Can they justify putting the money into? So here's the thing. When Justin made that decision to pivot from Marvell, essentially, which is kind of what they're doing, they're pivoting from this Marvell relationship to NVIDIA. Was it kind of something that he just thought it makes more sense to go with NVIDIA because I like the attractions of AI RAN and all the stuff they do there?
And I like their $1 billion.
Yeah, but to that point, was it something that they had to do because Marvell had said to them,
I see.
We can't justify doing this anymore. Unless you're going to pay us a lot more money, we can't justify the costs of putting,
and then maybe NVIDIA knew that.
Well, they probably did.
And then they go, we can make this bill go a long way
And then-
because these fuckers are desperate.
So where else do you get this? Here's the question: if Marvell's saying that and they're expressing concern, you don't have the same as Ericsson Silicon. You don't have your own custom silicon business to the same extent as Ericsson does or Huawei does. And getting that stuff started, by the way, these days, forget about it. Yeah. Like Ericsson gets presented with this argument all the time. Can you justify the costs of custom chip development given these concerns that analysts express about small shrinking market? If you put that to Per Narvinger, who's the incoming CEO, his response is, yes, I get what you're saying, but because we've been doing it for so long, the incremental costs are actually not that much from year to year. If we were to start from scratch now, it'd be a nightmare. Which I think is a bit of a dig.
Well,
I think it's a bit of a dig, actually.
Probably is, in that subtle, understated Swedish way. So let me bring it back to one or two of your headlines. So your most recent headline on this was Nokia weighs NVIDIA for 6G radios in spectral scrap versus Ericsson.
That's something we haven't even talked about.
Oh, is that a different thing? Okay.
No, it is the same story, but there's an aspect of it that we haven't talked about.
And then the only other one also mentions 6G. You said Nokia says long-term 6G is not doable without NVIDIA.
Yeah.
So you've written two stories relatively recently that have Nokia, NVIDIA, and 6G in them.
Yeah.
But I mean, they could be complete. You correct.
No, so I mean, just to finish off the chip stuff. What I'd say is, when Justin made this decision about a relationship with NVIDIA and $1 billion injections, obviously, as you say, that's very nice. Thank you. I'll have $1 billion. You cozy up with a company like that. It has an effect on the share price anyway, which it has done.
Just can I give you a quick butt in on the share price? Because I was doing
it has been coming down. I was
doing a bit of Googling because we've been talking about Nokia and Intel.
Yeah.
And both of them had very similar trajectories this year, which is that they slightly counterintuitively leapt up, like doubled, tripled in price earlier on this year. In the case of Intel, that's corrected down by about half from its peak.
Yeah.
In the case of Nokia, it's almost down to where it was. I mean, well, no, it's still well up on the year, but way below its peak.
Well, I think a lot of that, you see that with a lot of AI companies at the moment. I mean, this is AI bubble speculation, I think.
Well, and I was going to say that because then I looked at Ericsson's, and Ericsson hasn't had the same trajectory.
Well, they're down a lot at the moment.
They are down, but they haven't had quite the...
I think that's for different reasons.
But they haven't had quite the bubbly peak and trough. I mean, their peak and trough is only like 20-30% either way, whereas with Nokia, it's been 100-200%.
So I looked at Ericsson earlier today, and if you look at them year to date, they're down a lot from June. They're down a lot from June. They're down about a quarter from June. So since Per Narvinger got introduced as the new CEO, their share price has fallen about 25%.
Well done, Per.
Well, I don't think that's to do with him.
No,
I think the reasons that Ericsson's down I think it's two reasons. One is AI-related component costs. Like everybody's worried about what this is costing companies at the moment because they need access to the same memory chips. And I think the other is lack of a growth story.
Indeed, but the point I want to make just before we move on from it is the severity of the swings have been much greater with Nokia and then also with Intel. And I conflate the two because what I'm trying to theorize is that Nokia is perhaps more exposed to these sort of silicon swings. So let me give you an illustration of the severity of the swing. Nokia's peak, as recently as, where are we? 5th of June, it was up 1308, which that's the Helsinki. I can't remember the currency there, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And now it's down to 810. So the swing has been more severe.
Yeah, I think it was always going to be more volatile once NVIDIA waded in, really. You know, and their story is very much
because
about
the start of this.
And their story is very much about AI anyway, in a way that Ericsson's
exactly.
isn't.
Well, that's kind of the point I was making.
Which is actually not really to do with Iran, the bigger AI opportunity for them. But
so the long and short of it is, NVIDIA is more directly exposed to the whole broader AI bubble. It seems than Ericsson.
But just to tie off the thing I was saying about Marvell and NVIDIA, I think when he did this deal with NVIDIA in late last year. One point that's been made to me, and I won't say by who, but because it was sort of slightly confidential, but I think it's a really interesting point, is that maybe there wasn't anybody else that they could actually get chips from. if Marvel had expressed concern about the business model of doing this, and I know from sort of...
and they've already given up on Intel.
I know from my own digging around that Marvel has had concerns about the business model of doing RAN chips.
As you just described, perfectly good reasons why a minute ago.
And then you look at who else you get it from. Right. The relationship with Intel is bad, right? Because of what happened back in 2018, as you were just saying, the whole early Reef Shark stuff. That relationship was in a very, very bad place. Now, maybe someone like Justin could have done something to rescue that because he came from that background himself. Tommy Wheato and Mark Atkinson, the people that would have been at Nokia throughout this whole period, and not running it, by the way. It was Mark Ruan, I think, who was there in charge of that division when these decisions were made about Intel. But they have, I think it's fair to say, they were quite upset about what happened with the whole Intel thing. And there was obviously a move on the part of Nokia to move away from Intel to other companies, those being Marvell on the baseband side, Broadcom when it comes to digital front-end chips, and basically try and get away from Intel as much as possible. The relationship was almost broken on the RAN side of things. So for them to go back to Intel always maybe looked a bit improbable anyway. Plus, Intel itself has had its own problems. Like there's all these concerns about the state of Intel at the moment.
They've had a massive swing this year in share price.
Yeah, the concerns about x86 and whether ARM's presenting more of a feasible challenge to that. Most investment going into GPUs. Nothing that's that RAN specific, but the RAN specific side of it is that the Network and Edge group, which used to be like seen as a growth opportunity by Intel, has really been deprioritized over the last couple of years. I mean, the person who was running it, Cristina Rodriguez, left, joined Coherent a few months ago. Okay. Almost seems to be leaderless. It's been broken up and sort of absorbed into other bits. There's these big. If you're on that route and you're like Samsung and you're thinking it's all about Granite Rapids and Sapphire Rapids and what comes next, the kind of CPU products that are aimed at the RAN. I think it's a very nerve-wracking time because who knows whether Intel at some point will just go, it's not really worth it. Who else is there, right?
Because they've had a really big recovery this year. Their share price up 150%.
I know, and I think a lot of that's to do with government.
But it won't be to do with the RAN,
it's government support and...
Yeah, that's true, the government
underpinning it and NVIDIA and SoftBank, basically. I think a lot of it's to do with...
So it's just everyone just mucking in.
Yeah, and so... there is an argument that as you get more CPUs rolled out, you obviously need CPUs as an anchor for basic workloads, and I think that's part of it as well. Yeah. But if you take those guys out of the picture, take Intel out, take Marvell out, who else does baseband silicon? Nokia's not going to get it from Ericsson. They're not going to get it from Huawei. AMD, NVIDIA, mentioned there's not really anybody else. There's a company called Ampere, an ARM-based company.
I don't think we've ever really had much interaction with AMD on the matter of telecom silicon, have we?
I mean, AMD is doing telecom silicon. They have a pitch.
I just haven't really heard from them myself. Maybe you have.
Well, yeah, I have. I mean, they have a vRAN pitch. They have their product that's aimed at. They have a virtual RAN approach, and they are seen as one of the alternatives to Intel. If you're going to do a virtual RAN network, Samsung is working with AMD at the moment. That was an announcement a couple of months ago. The concern about AMD has always been, what do you do about acceleration? So. This is getting into the weeds a little bit, but radio access network software, there are bits of it that are very hard to put on a CPU because they're so energy consumptive and they basically require a bit of customization to handle it. So you have to put those functions that need that. You need to have something else in the mix rather than just a CPU. Yeah. Intel has this thing called vRAN Boost that it kind of integrates with its latest processors. What AMD was doing was proposing an FPGA-based card to do that called T2, like the movie. But
more on that in a bit.
but people have concerns about using FPGAs because they're also seen to be quite power hungry. So is that the most sensible approach to do the acceleration?
FPGAs was that misstep that Nokia made as well.
Yeah, I mean, so AMD's always
they're more expensive as well than
they're
ASICs.
More expensive.
Yeah.
So they've been there, but they've never been seen as good an option as Intel if you're going to do virtual RAN. AMD's never really had. And so basically what you're looking at is a market where there aren't really very many people that want to be doing RAN chips anymore. And here's NVIDIA going, Yay! We'll do RAN chips for you because you can use them for AI RAN. You can do all this stuff.
And we'll check your cache.
And we'll check your cache. And by the way, you can tell operators.
We'll take you out for dinner.
We'll take you out for dinner. You can tell operators they can make loads of money from selling AI inference at the edge. And that's basically why I think they went in with NVIDIA for this deal. I think that's. Now you were asking those questions about 6G and
because in terms of time,
I mean that might be one for another.
Well, if you think there's a whole segment, I mean, we can still go on for about another 10 minutes, but then we'll have to move on.
Well,
so from your point of view, you're the boss of this topic.
I mean, the idea that it's you need a GPU to do 6G, I think, is obviously a bit of a marketing pitch that Nokia's pushing. That this, that they were basically saying, if you looked at the transition that happened from 4G to 5G, you remember that software upgradable thing that went around for a while? Everybody's saying, oh, there's stuff software upgradable. There's stuff you've rolled out for 4G. You can use that for 5G as well.
And that's a narrative again with 6G.
Yeah. And what happened was, according to Mark, when I talked to him at Nokia, he was saying that, it got people into 5G, the old stuff. But then after a while, it turned out they needed to replace it because it didn't have the oomph you need for the more advanced kind of stuff that comes with 5G.
Term, the oomph.
The oomph, yeah. I don't know if he said that, but so he was saying that he thinks there's going to be a similar thing in 5G to 6G, where maybe some of the custom silicon that's used for 5G now and things like Granite Rapids, the Intel stuff, will be good enough for early stage 6G. But by the time we get to sort of 2033, 2034, when things are becoming more sophisticated and the 1G lasts 10 years, right?
And we're using it for ISAC everywhere.
Totally. That his argument was that some of the numbers that their experts have been running show that you're going to need something that's actually a lot more power. To your point about parallel processing and what a GPU gives you, you need something with that kind of.
So that sounds
ability.
Like a recurrence of an argument I'm sure I've heard before about NVIDIA silicon in the RAN is sort of future proofing. And fair enough, but that's a very well known sales pitch.
Yeah.
Like spend more than you need now because it will come in handy later.
Yeah.
Versus spend exactly what you need now.
Yeah.
And of course
that is what it is to some extent.
Yeah, and of course, there's no guarantee that this future proofing will be necessary. So you're taking a bit of a risk by investing more now in the hope that it's going to save you money in the long term. So it's a bit more of a punt, isn't it?
And then the other side of it, the bit about radio chips is, so everything we've been talking about has been about baseband, the bits in the servers, slotting in a card at the back, having pizza box equipment. The radio units themselves, there hasn't really been a sort of story about GPUs in radio units. That's not something that NVIDIA's come out with publicly. However, a few months ago, Light Reading did a story on NVIDIA looking at the prospect of having here's the thing, massive MIMO, which is this very sort of antenna rich technology that you need for things like beamforming, and the radio units for that.
And you need for making use of all that spectral real estate you get further up there.
Yeah, so it's the most advanced sort of radio units, the costly ones that get sold, the ones that Ericsson and Nokia want to sell because I think they make a lot of money from sort of flogging them. But there's going to be a lot more of
bigger, more expensive bits of kit.
Yeah, the 6G roadmap that's been kind of set out by the companies and just by the 3GPP generally, it sounds like it's going to involve a lot more massive MIMO. These radio units, I think today we talk about units with 32 transmitters and receivers, or 64 maybe. They're talking about 128, 256 in
it's always powers of two. That's the rule.
It is, yeah. And when you do that, you need to do some of the layer one so the kind of bit that involves the most oomph, to use that word again, is sort of layer one in the RAN software stack. And you need to do some of that in the radio unit and not in the kind of baseband equipment. You need to do some of that processing. The chips that they would use at the moment, Nokia's chips, would be Marvell ones. They have a beamforming chip, basically, the massive MIMO equipment, to do some of that lo-fi, it's called, the part of the layer one that does things like beamforming and some of the other stuff. And the fact that they use Marvell makes it quite convenient to do. You're basically splitting your software across the distributed unit, which is your baseband server, and the radio unit. If you've got the same silicon provider on each side, same software, platform and everything, it's the most sort of convenient way to do it.
Okay.
NVIDIA, even though it's not actually denied or confirmed that it's officially that it's doing a GPU that would be aimed at taking that role, that job of doing lo-fi processing in the radio unit, has argued that doing a GPU for the radio unit to do that would bring enormous advantages in 6G, because it's going to be even more, there's going to be even more processing involved. The radio units are going to have to be even more sophisticated. They're going to have to do a lot more work, and therefore putting a GPU in and replacing the chips that might come from the likes of Marvell with an NVIDIA GPU would hold huge attractions, basically. And so that's what that headline's to. Because I asked, so Nokia is not saying we're now talking about putting GPUs into radio units as well as distributed units, but it's to be decided. So they're basically going through a refresh of their massive MIMO product range at the moment. It's called Habrock, that brand. And I think by 2028, they have to make a decision on what they're going to do.
Right.
And one option is to do this GPU-based approach, but actually putting GPUs into radio units.
Right.
And sort of overhauling that as well, which would then really be an end to having Marvel in the mix, yeah?
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what that headline's to. But we don't, yeah.
That feels like quite one of those sort of slightly, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of theological schisms.
Yeah.
In terms of the best way of going about this technology.
Yeah, well, I think the whole thing is altogether with the GPU versus other silicon options to do this. You know, can you do it with GPUs? Can you do it with CPUs? Is there a future for custom silicon? That's the big question.
It can be quite a big. So, I mean, whereas in the past with competing companies, you might have made your choice based on things like price or post-sale support or existing relationship. Now, perhaps more than ever, there's going to be a massive technological choice to be made between the two.
Well, I think the questions about price and the support are still going to be just...
Of course, and I'm not saying they're going to disappear, but this new element
totally
seems to be a very prominent factor.
It's all going to come down to how much it costs. Is it the most efficient way of doing it? Does it give you any advantage otherwise? That's always going to be the key question.
Yeah.
You know, and custom silicon, by the way, everybody that I talk to on this topic, they still maintain that custom silicon, an ASIC that's designed to just do radio access network software, is always going to be the best way of doing it. Nothing's ever going to change that. The question is, can you justify the investment needed when your returns are so poor from a small and shrinking market? That's the question.
Yeah.
And if general purpose stuff, whether that's a CPU or a GPU, which increasingly get talked about as general purpose chips, if they can come in and close the gap sufficiently and do it in an economical way, then maybe it's good enough and we move to those platforms.
Well,
that's the big question.
I mean, you know, in previous lives as a tech journalist, I can remember NVIDIA going on about GPU.
Yeah.
It's been a strategic priority of theirs for a very long time.
Yeah, now they're pitching them to all sorts of things. They're talking about them in cars. They're talking about them in robots. They're talking about them in gaming units.
And it stands to reason. Of course, of course, they didn't historically just want their GPUs to be put in gaming PCs. Of course, they wanted wider use for them.
Totally.
And then they hit the jackpot with this LLM phase. But, you know, someone like Jensen Huang, he's not going to rest on his laurels. In fact, we've seen how volatile various share prices have been. I'm pretty sure NVIDIA's been pretty volatile this year as well.
Yeah.
He wants to take this opportunity to insinuate NVIDIA silicon into as many different other industries as possible.
Well, I think if you look at NVIDIA year to date, it's very modest improvement at the moment overall compared with what it was doing obviously last year or the year before. It's like it looks more like a normal company for once rather than these ridiculous... I mean, you can check, but I've looked at it recently and it looked like a more kind of modest growth rate over the course of the year.
Yeah, year to date. Yeah, you're right. It hasn't been so jagged, the line.
Yeah.
Because I think I read some stat, and obviously you have to allow for the fact that over time the figures involved tend to be more exaggerated because of inflation and just because everything costs more. But something like 5 of the top 10 biggest intraday share price losses by total value are accounted for by NVIDIA in the last year or two.
Yeah.
So it's been that volatile.
Well, the other interesting thing I thought was, I think it was, Benedict Evans, the analyst.
Vaguely.
He's very prominent on like social media platforms.
Okay.
He's regarded as one of the main tech analysts in the world. Actually.
Okay, all right. I probably didn't know of him.
He put together some charts showing what kind of percentage of the S&P 500, if you like, is accounted for by the top 5 or 6 companies in the world, and he showed it from like 1950 through to,
And it's just a larger and larger proportion.
well, so 1950 it was like, 1950 looks like now, because I think it was a few big oil companies and a couple of big banks and Ford,
right.
and then it goes down to a more kind of healthy like mix, and then it's now gone back the other. It's like a U basically. And I think the point he was trying to make is that a really good position to be in, especially when it's considered to be a volatile market.
I think everyone agrees that especially the US economy is incredibly overexposed to AI.
To those few companies, exactly. Yeah.
And it is volatile, and it probably is scary for anyone who's involved in investment, or even people like us who aren't actively involved, although Pierre dabbles a bit more actively than I do. But all of us are involved who've got pensions.
Yeah.
So yeah,
there were good news from Microsoft yesterday. The stock, I think, is up like 14% right now.
Yeah, well, they seem to have sort of diversified their bet a bit more, but presumably their outlook and their fundamentals were pretty solid. But yeah, I mean, Nvidia is flat year to date.
There you are.
But it was up. What's it right now? It's 197. Its peak was 235, which was in May, but it had a trough. That's where it's been volatile. In March, it had a trough of 165. So it's still been swinging about a fair bit, to be fair.
That was the Iran war, though, the March stuff.
Oh, so that was a big sell-off for everyone. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it is. But year-to-date performance, I think if you looked at Nvidia at any point in the last few years, how it had done between January and July, it would have been like a ridiculous level of growth. All of a sudden, we're in a year where it's flat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
for whatever reason, I think there are.
If you go onto the 5-year one, the growth is 900%.
Yeah, and you look at that in the context of, as you just said, in Nokia being down quite a bit recently, various other companies that are in this space being down quite a bit recently. I think there are some sort of worries. I mean, the bubble word's been used a lot. I know for a couple of years now, everybody's trying to anticipate.
The crazy one is SanDisk. I mean, SanDisk a year ago was at 40.
That's memory, though, yeah.
$40, right?
Yeah.
But that's an AI stock.
Yeah.
It hit $2,400 in June.
Fucking hell.
Well, the ones you really want to look at are Micron, SK Hynix, and Samsung.
No. I mean, yeah. Okay.
And SanDisk.
Yeah,
SanDisk is part of that mix.
Those are the big memory guys.
They're the manufacturer. SanDisk is more of a retailer or whatever.
It's SK Hynix, Micron, and Samsung are the big guys in that space. They're the stocks that have gone absolutely ballistic recently.
Micron went from 110 to 900.
There you are.
But that's not as much as...
Yeah, he's saying that SanDisk...
Yeah.
Somehow SanDisk, who makes, the cards that go in my camera.
Yeah, they make the look, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, okay. All right, are we all right to move it along, right?
Yeah.
So we love on this podcast a little bit of AI dystopia. This one might be a bit colder. We're trying to find out which has been closer to the frozen carrots.
Oh, that's not so bad.
All right. And while you've been on holiday, they've just been crossing the ball in for me to head in these easy goals.
Unlike the England team.
Well, indeed.
Although they did play well against France.
That was an amazing game.
Yeah, I didn't see that. That's the one I didn't watch.
Oh, no, England-France game was mad, wasn't it, Pierre?
It was mad, yeah.
It was cool.
Yeah, that looked like a lot of fun, that game.
It was. Well,
it took all the goals out of the real final.
Yeah, the real final was dry. I mean, Argentina...
I watched the final. In Slovakia, I watched the semi-final with my Slovak family, who were all like horrified at how bad Argentina were, like in terms of fouling.
Yeah, it's interesting that neutrals.
Oh yeah, the neutrals were like.
Right.
I mean, I guess they're maybe not completely neutral because they have English relatives now, but they were like all the conversation was like, "This Argentina team's awful. Look at the amount of cheating
They're very
going
cynical.
on."
They're very cynical. Yeah. They'll foul you, and then you give them a dirty look, and they're thrashing around like a landed salmon.
Yeah, it's terrible. I thought.
Fucking irritating.
So glad they didn't win.
Don't get me started.
Yeah. So yeah, let me just, so basically what, my AI set sort of output comes into two broad categories. One is the more science fiction dystopian stuff, where I got two takes, which I wrote a little bit longer ago. And another has been, a couple of more recent stories. So I'll put it to you. Do you want and these are more to do with like immediate things to do with like regulation and all that sort of thing. So do you want the more hysterical one or the more, immediate current affairsy one first?
Let's build up. Let's have a build up to the
so the more immediate ones I wrote, think it's, this week. I wrote in 2 days in succession. First one, in fact, talk about NVIDIA. Had I planned this more, I would have pretended this as a segue. My headline was NVIDIA Alliance calls for open models to tackle rogue agents. Now, this comes from a bit of news that happened last week, where there's like a sort of software development community or platform called Hugging Face. Seems a bit like seems a bit like GitHub or something.
Yeah. Spilled some
don't put the camera on Ian. He's got dribble all over it.
So I'm not used to drinking beer on the pod.
There we go.
I've done it for a while. So.
And anyway, so Hugging Face got hacked, but it turned out it got hacked by an agent running a sort of a newer version. I think it might have even been a prototype version of OpenAI's LLM.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this agent, they'd set it a task, and this agent had gone off and had a little think. I know I deliberately use the word think to provoke you. Had a little think and thought, well, I think the best way.
I'm less provoked by you saying it as opposed to reading Economist stories they're even now using.
Well, indeed.
Which is an awful write-up of the interview that she did with Elon Musk, I thought, the leader.
Minton Meadows.
Yeah, the business section was better, the write-up in that, but she'd really sort of bought into his whole. She's quite good at questioning him on some things and trying to hold him to account on some
good interviews over the years.
Yeah, and I thought the whole stuff on politics, which she says she's probably not a very technical person,
right?
But she just seemed to swallow some of the AI stuff, which I've noticed the Economist doing recently. They've really bought into this whole dystopian vision, and it's
maybe a lack of proper geeks on their staff is a Achilles heel.
They do have an AI guy, but he seemed. I don't really like a lot of his stuff. I think he's questioning enough about this. He's far too much like, this is what the guys who know about it say, and I'm just going to go along with the vision.
And who are we to question?
Who are we to question, sort of thing. But anyway, sorry.
So this agent was given a task to complete, and it went off and had a little think and thought, I reckon the way I can do this is by finding a way of hacking into this Hugging Face, and that would be the most efficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
And this turned out to, and Hugging Face was like, what the fuck? And in the end, OpenAI went, oh yeah, I think that was us. And that led to a big flap. And quite rightly so. I mean, this is more fully dystopian because it just feeds into that fear that people like you and I think any other moderately skeptical person, i.e. who doesn't work for The Economist, does, is like, look, problem with agents is that you're deliberately saying to them, look, I don't really care how you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just fucking complete this task. So they could do it by turning the world into the Matrix or something.
The worry, I think, is this gets talked about a lot in telecom. You know, this kind of level 4 intent-based networking stuff. You know, we set you a task. We don't want to get involved in how you go about it, all these different steps.
Yeah, just get the job done.
Just get it done. And then, okay. But what could happen? What could go wrong? I mean, there could be an equivalent that's just as awful as this, no?
I mean, the guardrails are obviously inadequate right now.
Yeah.
And how to implement guardrails while still having something behave in an agentic way is way above my pay grade, but I think we've got to do it. Anyway, so NVIDIA created this alliance and it called for open models. My headline is calls for open models to tackle rogue agents in reference to that thing I just described.
Yeah.
Now, what happened there was, apparently Hugging Face had to rely on an open model to get to the bottom of this and to mitigate the attack. And there's all sorts of stuff. Again, it's too geeky and above my pay grade to fully understand, but there's all sorts of debate about open weight versus closed models, and the various pros and cons. And, And Anthropic and OpenAI, ironically, are both closed.
Yeah.
So OpenAI, this is one of Musk's big gripes against OpenAI, isn't it? That it's not fucking open.
Yeah.
Whereas
Grok open?
I think so.
Well, it's just open source, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what this. They say open weight. I don't know if there's a substantial difference between open source and open weight. But anyway,
open weight. Okay.
Yeah, it's a phrase. It's a phrase that comes
closed, or open source and proprietary. Sure.
But yeah. Well, it comes up again. You know, I don't know enough to fully understand. But they say open weights. Anyway,
so there are security pros and cons to both, really.
Well, yes,
you could be just as critical of something. That's
a big part of
the whole thing about open source is it's much easier for someone to come along and insert rogue software in because it's open. You get open source projects.
But then conversely, it should be easier for the open source community to identify when that thing has happened.
Well, that's the pushback.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, Kubernetes, for instance, one of the concerns about, allowing Huawei into some of these open source initiatives was that it came along a little bit like, when it comes into the 3GPP with like hordes of Chinese people just entering the room and like dominating the discussions. And if they're like taking a massive interest in the open source side of things and other people aren't as engaged in it on a particular project, then there's an opportunity for them to do some malicious stuff. Now, I'm not saying they are doing, I emphasize, but that could be the concern.
No, fair enough. And actually, it just so happens that Chinese AI, which seems to be keeping pace quite well with American AI, even though we've got all these US silicon embargoes, like they can't get hold of the best NVIDIA GPUs and all that sort of thing. Yeah,
well, maybe their software is better because of that, yeah?
Well, indeed. It could be, but their software is typically all open source as well.
Right.
So I think the reason NVIDIA came up with this thing, and all the other people in this alliance, it include tons of other tech companies, but none of the big AI companies, came up with this thing, is because they're worried about the American government going, well, fuck open source. That's Chinese, therefore that's bad, therefore we're going to ban it. And at the same time benefit our own domestic companies like Anthropic and OpenAI.
Okay.
And all these other companies, and it includes Microsoft, I think, by the way, they're like, no, don't do that. That would be a fucking bad idea for various reasons. And you can read my story to find out a lot about it. And it's built on a thing announced by a Linux Foundation called Acrites. And that name comes from Byzantine frontier guards. So that's the kind of metaphor they're saying, the frontier guards. And it's it's an open source security thing.
The Byzantium as in like Constantinople?
Yeah, it's in the Eastern Roman Empire sort of thing. Yeah.
Oh, I never heard that word before.
No, nor had I till I was looking it up for this story.
Okay.
But and so anyway, so they come out of this and they're basically saying, look, America, let's not be silly about this shit. Open source brings a lot of good shit to the table. If we ban it, it's going to have all sorts of unintended consequences. Please don't do it.
Right.
Whereas people,
presumably Elon Musk was in this camp as well because
I think SpaceX is one of the founding.
So he was on the side of let's have something that's like open sourcey and possibly Chinese.
So it's called Open Secure AI Alliance.
Right.
So there's all sorts of stuff going on there, and then a day later, I wrote a story headlined. So this was yesterday. I published this. US AI companies call on government to restrain them.
Yeah.
And basically about 1,000 employees of, quote, frontier AI companies, which frontier seems to be the AI speak for leading or cutting edge or whatever.
Yeah.
I've come, you quite like it. I almost started it in an Ian Morris sort of way. I said, like compulsive gamblers seeking external sources of the restraint they lack, the US AI community has got together to lobby the US government to take part in a global movement. Bit of a long sentence that, aiming to slow down the rate of AI development. And it's called Pacing the Frontier.
Okay.
And so there's loads of these people have all signed in going, look, we need you to make us slow down. And then I say sort of later on, I say, you may be tempted to ask why, if they're so worried about this stuff, don't they just make the requisite adjustments independently? Yeah. And then I say the obvious answer is that they're all participants in an AI arms race, competing not just against each other, but also the rest of the world, chiefly geopolitical bogeyman China to make ever more powerful AI. And then there's some supporting quotes from AI geeks. I'm going to read some of them out because, I cherry picked them, but, I didn't make them up. So Laura Weidinger, who's a research scientist at Google, if it's true that, quote, if it's true that AI will be as transformational as electricity, we better be intentional about how it's introduced to the world. A mindless race without assurances on government safety or the technology serving public interest stands in the way of such intentionality. And then it ramps up. Leo Gao, who's at OpenAI. The world is locked in a deadly race towards, this is OpenAI saying this shit, in a deadly race towards an intelligence explosion where AI's ability to create better AIs, this is a good point he makes, listen to this, where AI's ability to create better AIs reaches a critical point, just like a runaway nuclear chain reaction.
Yeah.
Because it's back to this agentic thing.
Yeah.
We're already at a stage where loads of people are saying is like, look, we're just letting it get on with improving itself, which is very fucking Skynet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then he goes, going slower will give us much needed time to make it go well, but no individual actor is willing to stop unilaterally. To survive, we must coordinate, slow down. And one more short quote from Ethan Perez at Anthropic. With the current rate of AI progress, safety teams at AI companies have to sprint to prevent new risk to society every few months. By sprint, they mean fucking all hands on deck.
Yeah.
He goes, at some point, we're going to hit problems we need more time to solve. So they're all kind of ringing the alarm bells that this shit's getting out of hand. Yeah. And this is the AI companies. But they're kind of admitting, like this compulsive gambler, that until someone drags them away from the poker table, they're just going to keep doing it. They're going to keep, trying to win more and more.
Yeah.
So those are the two slightly more dry sort of procedural things I wrote about this week. And then
it's not the first time.
Sorry.
I was going to say, it's not the first time they've asked to be regulated, is it? I think there was there was something a couple of years ago when Sam Altman probably said we need to be regulated.
And that brings up another interesting issue. Sorry, you finish.
I was just going to say that when things like that happen and you go, well, what's the ulterior motive here?
No, we are. I was about to lead up to that.
Yeah, why is he asking that? And I think a lot of the takeaways at the time when he came out with that comment were that they could cope with regulation more easily than some
regulatory capture.
Yeah, exactly. They could deal with it, whereas some of these smaller players.
So for listeners who aren't familiar with the concept, regulatory capture is basically where really big companies that are already established and have got enormous compliance departments ask counterintuitively, it seems initially, for a high level of regulation. And the reason is, although it hurts them, it hurts up and coming competitors more.
Exactly.
Because they can afford it less and all that sort of thing. And actually, that's like a regulatory moat. Regulatory capture is actually a sinister level further, that implies a degree of covert collaboration between regulators and the companies, presumably involving brown envelopes and strip joints and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're right.
Yeah.
It's not the first time they've done it, but this time, they could still be trying to create some kind of regulatory moat.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think they are sort of going, look, because Trump's going to have Xi over for dinner in September.
Yeah.
And apparently AI is going to be near the top of the list of shit for them to talk about.
So they're worried about the Chinese getting ahead.
Well, what they want is for Trump and Xi to sit down and they go, look, we got to slow this shit down.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do a Xi impression, partly because I don't think I've ever heard the bloke speak.
No.
And certainly not in English.
You normally do it in Ray Winston.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So I can't believe you've actually forgotten that.
That's my get out clause. So he goes, we're going to slow shit down. And he goes, yeah, mate, you got a fucking point. It's getting out of order. But they won't.
No.
I mean, it's a nice idea. The best thing that will probably happen is they'll sit down, they'll have this exchange, they'll agree, yeah, this stuff's going to go mental. It's going to fucking take over the world if we don't put a lid on it. And then they'll look at each other and they'll go, so you're going to slow it down, yeah? Yeah, you? Yeah, definitely. And then they go off and go, yeah, speed it the fuck up. Because that's just how human nature and geopolitics works.
Yeah, I mean, there are, I read the book, I think you met her actually, Supremacy by Parmi.
Yes, I did bump into her. What's her
surname?
Alton from Blue Mountain.
Well, is she now? She was at the
she was
Journal,
when I met her, anyway.
When she wrote that book, but and it's quite recent. And it's a really good book. It's a really good read about the sort of Demis Hassabis versus Sam Altman and Elon Musk's in it and all the machinations that go on. And she asks really good questions that I think people like, Zanny at The Economist wouldn't, and because she obviously knows the topic. And she meets a lot of these people who've worked within these companies who themselves have left and almost set up think tanks to sort of explore the nasty side of AI and raise concern about it. And I think those people do exist. There are genuine people in that community who have looked at what's going on and thought, oh my God, if it carries on going this way, it's going to be terrible. I don't want to be involved anymore. I'm getting out of it and I'm going to do my job to raise awareness of it. This sort of thing, when there's when it's like loads of them who work for these companies saying this, I'm always a bit cynical. Yeah, what's going on here? What's the hidden agenda here? You're not really too worried about this stuff getting more and more powerful because that's basically what you're working on doing. So,
well, do you know what? I'm sort of somewhere in the middle. I think they are worried, but which is again why I use sort of like addiction metaphors.
Yeah,
you know, you could really like drinking, to pick a random example. But sort of think, fucking hell, I could do with dialing it down a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what it feels like. And then of course, unlike being an alcoholic, there are all kinds of commercial incentives to making better and better AI.
I mean, do you know what I think? It's sort of overdue in a way. I'm a bit skeptical about some of the claims that get made for AI, as you know, but I'm not skeptical about the claims that get made for software generally and reliance on software and heavy reliance on a few companies that do it. And one thing we've seen over the last few years happening to quite an alarming extent sometimes is when these outages happen, like AWS goes down on the East Coast, and all of a sudden you can't get into content stack or something that we need to get into.
That over-reliance on the public cloud has been a theme on this pod for years.
And it's sometimes like a human error, or sometimes it's just some kind of outage, but there's always a suspicion it could be a hack maybe. I think the fact that the whole world's become so invested in software and so much runs on it. Now you throw AI into the mix and take out the stuff about it thinking, but obviously you are entrusting it with tasks and it's going through a series of processes and making calculations that take people out of the loop. And obviously things can go massively wrong when you do something like that, as this Hugging Face thing shows.
And the more and more autonomous it gets.
And the more autonomous it gets, the more it is. And if there's an outage that does something like that, how bad could it be with an AI that goes, oh, maybe the way to deal with this problem is to fire a missile at someone, maybe.
Well, in fact, you were mentioning like level 4, level 5 automation. I had a chat with our colleague Ros Roseborough when I was in Copenhagen, and we were talking about this, and I was talking about these sort of what I call sedimentary layers of AI, where you've got something human, or you've got something, you've got the acorn at the bottom, the kernel, the source of all this information or data or best practice. But then you get these agentic layers on top of it, and one distortion in the sedimentary layer immediately above the source then gets amplified by successive layers above it.
Yeah.
And the same goes with like LLM training in general. These hallucinations, as AI gets increasingly self-referential, you can just see how there's a magnifying and amplifying effect.
Yeah.
So, so all that.
What was the massively dystopian?
I was going to say, I'm about to get into massively dystopian, but I might have a massively dystopian slash before we do that. Right. So, dystopian, or more dystopian. Although in some ways, when you get the whole rest of the industry acknowledging it, that's a bit more chilling. But, again, even allowing for your reservations about what their ulterior motive might be. But then the more fully dystopian, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago. I said, forget Terminator, the more immediate AI dystopia looks more like 1984.
Right.
My point being, and by the way, I happened, while I was researching that, I happened to find out that in that week it was World AI Appreciation Day. Don't you fucking hate those days?
Appreciation Day? Who wants to do that?
Well, quite. I mean, they got a whole website, mate.
Is there something wrong with these people? Thick. It should be banned, that organisation.
Just being so mean to it.
I know. Well, exactly. Like it needs appreciating.
He was the one who said if he was at a bar in future with a replicant, he'd have nothing to do with her at all, even if she looked like Sean Young.
No.
So
apparently that sort of sex bots are a growing thing. People are actually having it off with robots these days. Which you're not going to be able to do in the US because they've just banned all Chinese robots.
It's only in China this is happening.
Yes, exactly. I've heard talk of this stuff. I don't know anything about it myself.
That's not good for their birth rate.
No, exactly.
Well, there's a lot of frustrated men over there because there's about 100 million more men than women or something.
Thanks to their one-child policy.
That worked out well, didn't it?
Yeah, so
they've got real problems in their hands over the next few years. You don't have to worry about them invading Taiwan. They're going to be... They're just going to be fighting amongst themselves, I think.
So now they're all hooking up with robots. Meanwhile, what women there are going, "Oi, fucking, what's wrong with me?" Anyway, and I made a point about World Appreciation Day. Reading myself back, I said the corresponding site invites you to pledge to be really into AI, but first asks, quote, "Are you human or agent?" Yes, half the site is designed for AI agents and addresses them directly. So half of the website is not even meant for human consumption. It's just for bots.
What? I don't understand. Why would you have a website?
Well, because something like Google,
but it's got like a graphic user interface and everything, and
but it's got writing.
The average AI doesn't rock up with his cup of coffee and go, "I'm going to get in."
No, but it does. But it does scrape websites and read their copy. So you can, we touched on it a bit in the pod with Paul Nolan, where he was talking about how things have changed now that it's AI results rather than just straight up search results. Anyway,
I think we should carve out a separate website that's like free from the AIs can have their own website, and we'll do another one that's just for people. You're not allowed.
Well, it's getting that way.
You're not allowed to be on the website.
Well, there are ways in which you can stop web scrapers. There are bits of technology you can do, but then you don't come up on Google. Anyway, so. I would say I was making the 1984 comparison because I was talking about surveillance and AI and that. And I said, Orwell was presumably inspired in part by the dawn of the mass market television to write 1984. Imagine what he would write if he were alive today in his book entitled 2062. See what I did there? Because 1984, for people who don't know, was called that because he wrote it in 1948 and just inverted the last two numbers.
Yeah, it would have been radio, wouldn't it? I suppose mass market radio.
Well, no. If you think about the book, it's really the TV. It's those.
The images of Big Brother.
Yeah, exactly. And the TV is a sort of two-way sort of surveillance device.
Yeah.
And so
he sort of anticipated CCTV in a way.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And just mass surveillance he anticipated. If you think about the book, it turns out that even when they think they're sneaking off somewhere for a bit of How's Your Father, there's surveillance there as well.
Yeah. So he sort of anticipated the state of the UK in 2020.
Well, so this is kind of the point I'm making. And I talked about a few devices that are going to come up. Like OpenAI wants to come up with some devices that are probably going to be voice UI driven, that you just carry around with you like some fucking AI best buddy.
Yeah.
And
maybe you can even fall in love with it.
Well, exactly. And then plug it into a robot and the sky's the limit.
Yeah. Or you could just sort of stick it on the back of the head of one of those rubber inflatable things if you can't get access to a sophisticated Chinese one.
I think we've explored that avenue as much as this pod dare. And I say, this device will probably involve some kind of wireless headset on steroids, possibly one independent of phones, with which people will be in constant symbiotic dialogue as they seek AI affirmation and augmentation of even the most mundane and rudimentary decisions. I do have to work on the length of my sentences.
That's all right.
Well, as long as it's coherent, isn't it? And that's my point there, is just that increasing surrendering to this AI. But then I make the point, even more about Meta's developments with these AI glasses, and that's where the surveillance comes in.
Yeah.
If everyone's going to be wearing these AI glasses that have got cameras, and there are all sorts of anxieties at the time I was writing this about even ways of disabling the little red LED that says it's recording.
Yeah.
So let's assume there's a time where you've got glasses that look like your or my glasses, except they've got little cameras in the corner here, and you don't even know when they're turned on. So you're basically being surveiled all the time.
Well,
there's no privacy anymore.
What you're wearing at the moment in future could very well be a set of smart glasses, I suspect. You know, I mean, at the moment, apparently there's huge problems with trying to do a form factor like you're wearing.
Yeah, it's still a bit chunky.
They're really chunky.
But miniaturization will get them there eventually.
Yeah, they're really chunky. Okay, so the ones that are being, like Mr. Pierre will know this more than I do. The Ray-Ban ones that you see people walking around in connect to your phone, don't they?
Yeah, they're still peripheral rather than autonomous.
So I remember talking, I think I talked to Iago Tenorio about this, who's Verizon CTO, and he was saying to have ones that properly feed information from the glasses themselves up to the future 6G network or whatever requires like an antenna that you just couldn't put into glasses at the moment. He said you'd end up looking like a porcupine, I think.
Right. Well, that's
which isn't ideal. So
no.
And so something like what you're wearing or what I'm wearing just wouldn't work. But if you could do that, and I suspect it will come, because that's the kind of technology.
Well, exactly.
So advantage.
So exactly. So I'm doing a bit of extrapolation. I'm basically saying so I wrote that piece going, you know, maybe it's less Terminator and more 1984. And so you can see where it was coming from. Just this ubiquitous surveillance. And then you've got companies like Palantir, who's fucking named after the all-seeing orbs in Lord of the Rings.
They're a company that attracts a fair amount of criticism for being slightly sinister sounding anyway, in terms of some of the things they come out with.
Well, quite. So you imagine that degree of ubiquitous surveillance combined with the kind of technology that people like Palantir offer for profiling and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's a bit scary. So that was the point I made. And then lo and behold, I just went, okay, so let's park Terminator for now. And then the next week, a company that's also named after Lord of the Rings, which is getting quite tragic at this stage. These fucking geeks who just naming all their companies Legolas and shit. This one's called this one's called Anduril. Do you remember what Anduril is?
Is it something to do with Lost Lorien and the elves?
Yeah, it's the sword that Isildur used the shard of to chop the ring off the baddie.
Yeah. If you watch Peter Jackson's film, you can't be bothered to read the book. It's right at the start of it, isn't
That's
it?
That's it. Exactly.
His finger sort of disintegrates and there's just
leaves the ring. Yeah, exactly. Which ends up being obviously
good film.
They're fucking amazing. I think they slightly beat a dead horse with the Hobbit ones. Basically, with the Lord of the Rings, they got 3 big books and made 3 films out of it. With the Hobbit, they got 1 small book and made 3 films out of it.
The dead horse. Do you know what's coming? The search for Gollum and all this stuff. You've not seen what's in the pipeline? All this. Who's the guy who played Gollum?
It's Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis is doing like a 3-film thing.
They just made some new shit.
They're coming out soon. They're due to be released.
Gollum. Has this got any like Tolkien material, or are they just making up?
It's. I think there's some stuff in appendices, but it's the bit when I think there's a bit in the Lord of the Rings which kind of gets skirted over when when Gandalf went off looking for Gollum. I think. You know, and it's kind of like they shorten it in the film.
It's a little side quest,
and it's the whole. They've turned this whole thing into like a massive movie, and it just seems like I
mean, the Hobbit. If they'd made the Hobbit into 1 movie, that would have been awesome. The 3 movies just felt like they were stretching.
Well, there's more coming.
Right. Okay.
And probably more Rings of Power stuff from Amazon as well, which I know you love.
It's not set my world on fire.
I actually thought the second season was a lot better than the first season, though.
Yeah. I remember them now. But
I started with it, and I actually quite enjoy. We're getting on a bit of a tangent.
They had their moments. Anyway, so Anduril.
Pierre's even getting fed up with the tangent.
It's just like, get to the fucking point, lads. Well, it's not my fault that they keep naming stuff after the Lord.
It's a 2-minute tangent.
Yeah, I know. God, he's worse than you.
You're talking about the company from the VR guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anduril.
He's called Palmer Luckey.
Mm-hmm. Right. Anyway, he likes his Tolkien.
Apparently. And so he's come up with this. I don't know if you clicked on any of the links when I sent you them on Teams earlier.
I did.
So, I mean, the one where I went, so my headline here a week later was, okay, maybe it is time to start worrying about Terminator.
Yeah.
Now, in this particular case, it's not Terminator as in the, sort of metal skeleton Schwarzenegger thing. It's a drone device that cropped up in the 2nd and 3rd, especially the 3rd films, which were like early devices that Skynet made before.
The 3rd one.
It's the one that's got Claire Danes and a young.
It's got a woman in it as a Terminator.
No,
There's one with a woman as the Terminator.
Yeah, maybe that is it.
Terminator 3.
Yeah, exactly, but it's also got Claire Danes in it as a sort of major.
I remember watching and thinking that's a very attractive Terminator.
Careful, mate. God, blimey! You think these bots they got today are dodgy?
Well, it's played by a woman. It's played by a normal woman.
No, she's a beautiful actress. Anyway, so Anduril's come out with this drone called Thunder, and
they're using the AC/DC song when they advertise it.
Yeah, probably. Oh, actually, you got. I mustn't forget the little cartoon they used to promote it. It's just surreal. This stuff. Anyway, and I said, talking about their press release, the extensive release talks about the need to take maneuver warfare to the next level beyond the current robotic kill zone. Thunder is classified as Group 5, which we take to be the equivalent of Level 5, i.e. fully autonomous. Comes with all sorts of exciting features and benefits, including tilt rotors that enable vertical takeoff and landing, a series hybrid electric powertrain, which is an electric motor, but then it's topped up by an internal combustion engine, just creating more electricity on the fly.
Right.
And of course, loads of missiles and ways to kill people.
So this thing, you task it with going off and doing its job in a war zone, and it just
goes off and does it.
And there's no possibility, of course, that it could suddenly decide it's going to go and
there we are.
Shoot Scott Piceno, who's just walking along the street.
So here's my next paragraph. Human remote control of these killer drones would just slow them down. So Anduril has developed Lattice for mission autonomy software to control them. Quote,
oh my God.
Quote, by translating operator intent into trusted, Iain, so nothing to see here, it's trusted, into trusted machine speed, route timing, tasking, and deconfliction decisions. What, deconfliction? By blowing the fuck out of it.
Deconfliction.
You know what I mean?
I don't think I've ever come across that word before.
Well, they use all sorts of...
rapid disassembly.
Yeah, yes. Rapid pacification of baddies. Lattice eliminates the needs for pilots to manage Thunder with stick and rudder, enable them to focus instead on the most important decisions at hand.
Making a cup of tea.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like what to watch on Netflix. And I said again, this is very reminiscent of something. And so I'm saying this is all getting very Skynet-y.
No, but it's autonomous but friendly, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're a baddie.
It's good. There's good autonomous and there's bad autonomous, and this is good autonomous.
Oh, that's all right then.
And then you look at the Thunder, and then I embed a bunch of videos in my story, and I say, take a look at the videos below, and we challenge you to find much of a distinction between Thunder and the Hunter-killer drones from the Terminator films. So I've got 2 videos of Thunder, and then I got the Hunter-killer drones from Terminator films.
I remember those drones.
Well, so I'll remind you. I'll keep talking.
I didn't watch the clips in your.
Yeah, well, this is the clip. So I'm getting Iain to watch the clip of Terminator 3 where they got this hunter-killer drone, and then you compare it to. I don't even need to show you the video from the Thunder release. You just look at the picture.
Ah, yes.
So Ian's looking at it. And it looks just the same as that fucking Thunder, doesn't it?
Well, they probably watched this film and gone, how do we design this to look suitable?
To really reassure everyone.
Yeah, let's base it on what James Cameron did. Probably wasn't James Cameron.
They might as well just get it constantly saying, I'll be back, or some shit like that.
Yeah, okay.
So you get the point.
Yeah.
And so I'm going, look, man, you're not helping me with my Terminator hyperbole problem by coming up with devices like this. And it does look, just to remind you again of the photo ahead of my story. I mean, it doesn't look that different, does it?
No, it doesn't. It looks almost exactly the same, in fact.
So that's dystopia part 2, is that we are making these autonomous drones.
This is Anduril, is it, the company?
This is
Anduril's next product is one that looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Well, presumably. And this is a guy who's already been collaborating with Mark Zuckerberg to make AR headsets for military, I think.
Right.
And all that sort of thing. And anyway, just one last thing. I won't play much of it because it's quite long. But they came up, and I can't see what I'm doing.
No, I've seen the VR stuff, and that's kind of cool. What they do is that they make soldiers, they can see through walls now.
Right. Because
they have a drone overhead or satellite, whatever.
Okay.
And then it recreates. The image, so they can see behind the walls. You can see the enemy.
And it's got a sort of heads-up display, which again is reminiscent of Terminator. Whenever you see it from the Terminator's eye view, he's always got this heads-up display data and stuff going on.
Yeah.
And like threat or not threat.
The trouble, the thing about like military history is that this stuff always ends up in the other guy's hands pretty soon after you've started using it, doesn't it?
Well, but the biggest point of the Terminator thing is just the control aspect of it.
Yeah.
This is coming out of something very good, and it's obviously a great military technology. It's very handy for us until we lost control of it. I mean, that's the whole premise of all the Terminator films before you get into all the fun action.
Yeah. And
anyway, and as if to sort of lighten this up, Anduril shared this video.
Where's Anduril based then?
They're US.
And are they in the headlines a lot at the moment in terms of deals with the DoD? And
so this is their video they shared on Twitter, and it's basically like a sort of G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
I'll get to a bit where this thing comes up. Hold on. Listen, it's got cool music. It's got all these helicopters with their drone buddy with them.
It's like watching Apocalypse Now playing
Except
Ride
in
of the
a cartoon.
Valkyries as they fly into dump napalm on a bunch of Vietnamese villages.
To me, it's like G.I. Joe meets Team America World Police. Look, and it's got some AC/DC style music in it, which is probably generated by AI.
Making light of conflict.
And they make it like a cartoon. This is like, I don't know if Brits are familiar with G.I. Joe, but it's the American Action Man, and they had a whole cartoon series, and it's like G.I. Joe, a real American hero, and he'd be off killing commies and all that kind of shit.
It wasn't as good as Action Man, though, to be honest.
No, of course not. And so there was something very sinister about that, because they were making this new lethal autonomous killer drone into a fun cartoon. So yeah, I do recommend people click on my story where it says, okay, maybe it's already time to start worrying about Terminator, and just seeing those videos and that tweet at the end, because it's mad stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my rant about all that, and hopefully we're going to have another pod soon where we're talking to an expert on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll knock it on the head there, not least because we're running out of time, and we've got one more thing that we want to talk about, where I'll pass the ball back to you, where you wrote a piece headlined, Huawei too expensive to replace in EU, so deal with it, says GSMA.
Yes. Well, I was going to talk a little bit about AT&T and Verizon job losses.
Okay, well, you can tee it up that way.
No, I'm not going to do that, because it's got nothing to do with this Huawei story, and I think we've got about the AI thing for enough.
Well, and also in this other pod that I'm hoping to do soon, the matter of job losses and companies using AI as a way of fucking over their workforce will probably be quite a big feature.
Oh, you think that's going to be a big topic?
Yeah, it will.
Do you?
It will.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, put a pin in that.
Yeah.
So yeah, talk about your Huawei thing.
Yeah. So basically the background to all this is a move by the European Commission earlier this year to try and tighten up some of the rules on whether or not you're allowed to use Chinese vendors, those nefarious Chinese vendors.
Those moustache twirling,
spying on us, crippling national infrastructure, all that stuff.
Yeah.
i.e. Huawei and ZTE, in Europe, because...
And it's principally Huawei we're talking about.
It's principally, because I don't actually think there's any ZTE used at all, really.
ZTE got very becalmed when they fell foul of some American sanctions back in about 2018.
They did, but I don't even think at that point they were very well used in Europe.
Right.
Their main markets have always been outside. Africa, for instance, I think they're quite big in. Some Asian markets, maybe Latin America, but I don't think they've ever had a massive presence in Europe. Orange has used them to some extent. I think even in Spain they were using ZTE for a while. But
how do you say ZTE in French, Pierre?
I don't know, like Z2.
Z2.
Yeah.
So you say Z in French, do you?
Yeah.
Oh. It's Zeta in Spanish.
Sounds a bit. It's too many syllables.
They're just over engineering that.
Yeah. But the issue of Huawei being used in the West has been a big one ever since Trump's first administration. Even before that, actually, there were concerns about whether we should be using Chinese vendors to do mobile network infrastructure, and we had these moves in certain countries like the UK to get rid of Chinese vendors back into the 2020 time frame.
And by the way, I get it. If we've decided they're a geopolitical adversary,
Yeah.
then of course it makes sense to not overexpose ourselves to them.
Yeah, so
But I don't know if that's necessarily what we've decided.
no, that debate has continued to run
exactly.
while so what the EU did was rather than trying to implement a firm ban, they came out with this thing around sort of 2020 timeframe, around about the time the UK was introducing its legislation saying you've got 7 years to get Huawei out of your networks otherwise, which members of the Five Eyes, the kind of the intelligence sharing club, which is Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Canada and the US, they all sort of implemented fairly firm bans. Some other countries did of their own accord anyway.
Partly because the US went, if you still want to share intelligence, you better fucking do what you're told.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of any other European country doing it to quite the same extent, but there are some that have been quite. I mean, Sweden, for instance, had you can't use it if you win a 5G license, you can't use Huawei to build the 5G network, and that seemed to have ramifications for Ericsson afterwards in China and stuff. But there weren't many European countries that came out with quite hard legislation on this. It's all been sort of a lot of pussyfooting around, and the EU itself has had this thing called the 5G toolbox, which is a set of recommendations essentially, like you shouldn't be using Huawei in your core network or increasingly in your radio access network.
It was felt like a bit of a fudge. They were like going, look, we'd rather you didn't.
We'd rather you didn't, but we're not legislating
ultimately
on
it's
it.
up to you.
I mean, I think this is a reflection, to be honest with you, of political problems in Europe.
Yeah.
The EU, it doesn't have a...
There's not the United States of Europe.
It's not the United States of Europe. Countries make their own decisions on issues to do with national security, which is what this relates to. Therefore, can the EU come along and
the EU's got to be careful, because if the EU goes, oi, Poland do this, and Poland's got some... Or maybe Hungary's the best example when they had, was it Orban in charge?
Yeah.
And they go, Hungary do this, and Orban go, fuck off. And
yeah,
they'd
exactly.
be like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we weren't expecting you to say that.
So they had the 5G toolbox, and for the last few years, they've been sounding increasingly frustrated that a lot of countries haven't really done anything at all. They're still kind of using Huawei. Yeah. I think you listen to the estimates that Boye Ekholm gave on an earnings call not that long ago. He was saying he thinks Huawei is still about 33 to 40% of the European market,
especially Germany.
Especially so John Strand, got to give a shout out to John Strand because he's very good on this topic and has lots of good data. Like he was saying that it's really now concentrated in 3 countries. It's 2 operators in 3 countries. So the two worst offenders from his perspective in terms of using Huawei.
John is definitely keen on getting Huawei out of Europe.
Would be Deutsche Telekom and Vodafone. And the 3 countries are Germany, Spain and Italy. They're the big heavy users of... Okay. So I think he had a data point that was something like 55% of all the equipment now.
So DT doesn't have a presence in Spain and Italy, does it? So it'll be Vodafone in those 2 countries and DT in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, just...
Well, yeah, I mean, but Vodafone's in Germany as well. Vodafone's a massive presence in Germany. So,
Vodafone's really into it then.
Yeah, Vodafone's probably like maybe they're the heaviest user. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're a heavy user in the UK, by the way. Vodafone of Huawei. It's not gone.
Okay,
it needs to go. It's not gone yet. They messed around for a long time saying we're going to use Samsung and never got beyond 70 sites.
That's it.
So and that was
in like Devon or something.
September last year.
Yeah.
So that still needs to go. But the point of the story is it's not really gone anywhere. The EU's been sounding increasingly frustrated about this, and therefore at the start of the year they've got a new kind of commissioner in charge of all that called Hennifer Kuhnen, I think it is. She's Finnish.
And, one of those long ass job titles they've all got.
Yeah, well, it's a weird job title. They keep changing them all the time.
Head of making everything nice.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Getting on.
Digital sovereignty's in it and stuff. But she was whinging a year ago about the fact that people haven't done enough about it, and therefore maybe we need to firm up legislation. They've now got this CSA2. It's Cybersecurity Act 2. It's like modifications to the existing Cybersecurity Act. And rather than just having recommendations about not using Huawei and ZTE, or high risk vendors rather, because they haven't named them really, apart from in a couple of speeches until now. They'd introduce firm legislation where you have to get rid of those companies, and if you don't do it by a certain deadline, then there will be penalties. And this is sort of going. This is in debate. It's going through, and the GSM Association, which is one of the main telecom sort of trade bodies.
Which also runs Mobile Congress.
It also runs Mobile World Congress. It's effectively other than as a organizer of the Mobile World Congress and a few other shows, it's effectively a lobby group for the telcos.
Mobile operators, especially European mobile operators.
Has come out with this report in the last few days saying, pushing back very heavily, basically, against the idea of CSA2, like taking quite a strong position on it, I would say, to the extent where I think it's quite risky for the GSMA to be doing that. I mean, that was one of my takeaways. I think they risk upsetting two of the companies that pay a lot of their money, I would say, by doing this.
Which are?
Ericsson and Nokia.
Right.
And they also risk
especially
upsetting...
Nokia, that's been quite overt about thinking the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, Ericsson and Nokia will not... Well, I mean, to some extent, Nokia's been... I think Nokia has been a lot more overt, as you say, especially since Justin Hotard came in.
Yeah.
Ericsson's been more cautious, although actually I think the tone has changed a bit over the last few years.
Okay.
But
it'd be interesting to see what Per Narvinger's like versus Echo.
Yeah, but behind the scenes, I think they will be very, very upset. And also they're risking obviously upsetting the European Commission, which is a significant body because it's Europe. So I think it's quite a risky thing for them to do. But they basically came out with this report. I don't think Huawei says it never had anything to do with it. I completely believe that. I think the way it was done was to go to the operators and get their views on what it would cost to take Huawei out, basically. This is what the report's trying to do. It's trying to put a cost on doing that, and then what the economic implications of that would be, and what it would mean for prices afterwards. And the figures are very high if you compare them with what some analysts are saying.
Haven't we been playing with figures like this for quite a while, though? Like since the start of this decade?
Well, I'm not sure that many people have come out with figures saying the whole cost of replacing Huawei is this. I think people have tried to look at it on a country-by-country basis. And if you remember when the UK thing happened... Now, here's one reason why I'm dubious about these figures. It's in the interests of telcos to exaggerate the case, right? No telco is going to err on the side of caution and say, yeah, we could probably do it and don't worry about it. It's not that much hassle.
Yeah.
Because they don't, frankly, want to have to go through the hassle of taking lots of equipment.
And also, sorry if this is preempting something you're about to say, but they still know that if they can come up with a sob story, then they can get some public money to compensate them.
Yeah, well, I don't know about the public money aspect of it. But
I would assume an incentive they have for making a meal out of it, rolling around like a footballer, metaphorically, would be so that the EU or whatever go, right, how about we chuck you a few million?
Yeah, well, I think there's problems with doing that. So it hasn't happened in the countries where they've had to do it. Okay. Like the UK, they didn't get public money to do this.
Oh, okay.
It's viewed as state aid, illegal state aid, basically. I think.
I see.
Things like that. So I think there's problems with doing that.
Which is illegal.
They'd have to fund it themselves. And that's the issue, is like that they have to pay for it themselves. Like, even if you go along with the argument, which is John Strand's argument, that you can do this for a fairly low cost and it's manageable, and you're not told to do it tomorrow, you're given a few years to do it, they will still argue against anything that incurs any expense at all, because their whole job is to try and not spend money on unnecessary things. Plus the fact they quite like having Huawei, some of these operators.
It's
a good company vendor. In terms of the equipment. I mean, I don't hesitate to say that. Everybody you talk to says it does shit hot 5G stuff, it's price competitive, etc., etc. So they don't want to get rid of it. If you get rid of it, there's fewer options in the mix as well anyway. Given all that, I think they have a vested interest in exaggerating the amount that they would have to spend. Yes. And there's a precedent for that. So if you remember back in 2020, when Howard Watson and a certain Vodafone executive that I won't mention because I don't really want to embarrass the guy, but they were put in front of a parliamentary committee and told to estimate how much it would cost.
Why is it all right to embarrass Howard?
Because Howard won't be embarrassed by what I'm about to say.
Okay, fair enough.
They were put in front of a parliamentary committee and told to come up with figures for how much they reckon it would cost them to replace. I mean, the link I've put in my story, by the way, you can find out how that executive was anyway, because it links back to the 2020 story. But I think Howard Watson was at BT, the Vodafone executive, obviously at Vodafone. BT estimated the cost of taking Huawei out of the network would be £500 million. And they were given, obviously, 7 years to do this. End of 2027 is when they've got to get the radio access network equipment out. That as much as BT will complain about spending $500 million on replacing a vendor, if you look at it in the context of what BT spends on CapEx each year, and then divide it by 7, it's not actually that much.
I found the exact, and it's who I thought it was.
Yeah, and so the Vodafone executive said it would be billions. And there's no evidence they've spent billions, by the way. Now, they're obviously in the process of a replacement at the moment still of some Huawei equipment, but there's no evidence that over this period of time it's been something on that scale. Here's the other thing you've got to consider that I think the GSMA completely ignored in its report. Equipment depreciates, right? So at some point you have to get rid of 7 to 10 years has been the normal pattern, I think, for taking out equipment. I talked to a guy called Laurent Leboucher, who's the Group Chief Technology Officer of Orange, when I met him at FutureNet a few months ago. And he said, like late 2020s, across several countries, before 6G comes along, we're having a refresh. They're doing a tender. So, because if you think about it...
So then that's a time where if you're going to swap vendors, it's not such a big fact.
Exactly. This stuff is... If you think about equipment that was installed at the dawn of 5G, that's now about 7 years old, yeah? So I think a lot of this stuff actually needs replacing anyway, and whether or not there's a mandate, you'd have to incur that expense, whether or not there's a law forcing you to do it.
That's part of evidence that they're slightly overstating the cost implications.
Yeah, I think so. And... the other thing is, if you just look at numbers that other people come out with, those figures don't really compute. So the EC itself estimates that the cost would be between 3 billion and 4 billion a year annually over a 3-year period. So even at the upper end of that, you're talking 12 billion. But I don't know if I said what the GSMA's figure was, but they've estimated at a midpoint it's 35 billion. And that includes, by the way, not just mobile equipment, that includes fixed and transport stuff. Here's the thing, the EC's concern has always been 5G. There's not a big push to do with fixed and transport. Yeah. If you take that stuff out and look at what the GSMA...
35 billion.
Yeah, if you look at what the GSMA thinks
it would cost... $40 billion.
Yeah, so if you look at what the GSMA thinks it would cost just on the mobile side, it's 19 billion. Right. But even that is considerably more than the EC estimate of 3 to 4 billion a year over a 3-year period.
Right.
So here's the other data point that I've got, which is Germany. Germany, about 58% of the equipment of the 5G equipment comes from Huawei, according to various estimates, and including John Strand Consult. He estimates that the cost of replacing each site's about 50,000 euros. So you add that up, it's less than 2.5 billion euros divided between 3 operators. His figures tally completely with estimates from Barclays, the bank.
Okay.
Now if that's one of the biggest that is probably the biggest market that uses Huawei. And then if you're talking about 2 other ones where most of the equipment is concentrated, I don't really see how they get to this 35 billion or even 19 billion number.
And in the report, did they get into methodology?
Well, the methodology, they've not... So they were very critical of the EC's methodology because they said the EC's come out with this 3 to 4 billion a year for 3 years without really providing any evidence of how they came up with it. All they've said about their methodology is it's based on... and I'm not disputing that they did this.
Yeah.
It's based on input from telcos. It's based on... which sounds very, very thorough. But those telcos have a vested interest. Yeah. And here's the other thing, to the point about this upsetting Ericsson and Nokia. You've got to kind of question a report, even if Huawei wasn't involved in the preparation of this. Where does most of the GSMA's money come from these days? My knowledge, and from looking at old IRS statements and things, most of it comes from one thing they do each year that happens in Barcelona. And most of the money from that comes from a few big exhibitors that spend a huge amount.
The biggest of all.
The biggest of which I think is Huawei.
Surely, by a long way. Huawei's got a whole hall. The next biggest is Ericsson. They got half a hall.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the halls might not be exactly the same size, but I'm pretty sure.
So the other issue I would take with it is, so they said that besides the cost of it, which they said was being incredibly disruptive, obviously, to spend 35 billion, they didn't look at all at you just mentioned the security issue. We don't know whether China is slipping backdoors into Huawei equipment. No one's ever found any evidence. And Huawei itself says, we don't have anything to do with the Chinese government. We're owned by employees. Ren Zhengfei, the founder, told the BBC a few years ago, as improbable as it sounds, that if he was ever told to do spying by the Chinese government, he'd shut the company down first.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
then
whether you
then
want
you
to
spend a
believe
bit of
that,
time in the Jack Ma hotel after that.
whether you want to believe that or not, okay. But there's certainly no evidence, I don't think, that they have done that. At the same time, in today's world, and I'm not saying I particularly like the situation that we're in today, with everything being quite fraught, between different parts of the world, but I can understand why countries would be concerned about the possibility, especially given what's going on in Ukraine, crazy relations between China and Russia, about the possibility of spying, about the possibility of being able to turn a switch that causes disruption. The GSMA, I read the report, I speed read it, but there's very little attention given at all to the whole cybersecurity issue at all. If you were to tell the average person, 35 billion, what's the UK spending on a high-speed railway line that goes from north to south? Yeah. About 100 billion or something.
God knows.
Across the whole of the EU to spend... if you
and
said
it's not
to
even
someone,
north to south, it's to fucking Birmingham.
If you said to someone, spending this 35 billion minimises the possibility that some information gets back to Russia that they can use to attack an EU country, they'd probably go, fair enough. That seems like it's something. But they didn't pay any attention to that at all. And the other problem I've got with it is they also said, if you take Huawei out of the picture, you're essentially left with fewer options. And it would increase equipment prices by like 24%, I think.
Competition argument.
Which is fair enough. My response to that, to some extent, on the one hand, is so what? If you look at your two European vendors at the moment, and we've just gone over this, they're not in a very healthy condition, right?
Yeah.
Their margins are wafer thin.
They need whatever savings they can
get. The EC for years has had these consumer-friendly policies about maintaining a certain number of operators per country, about keeping a lid on roaming charges, about keeping a lid on other prices. Great for us. I love it. I like being able to go out and get a mobile phone for 20 quid a month that allows me to do whatever I want. Yeah. But if you look at ARPU since the 3G days, it's carried on going down. Yeah. While every other utility cost has gone up dramatically. Right. Yeah. And my sense of that, if I'm trying to be on the industry side, is we massively underpay for services. Maybe it's right that prices do start to rise.
You had a whole segment where you made that point not too long ago.
And here's the other thing. This gets to the issue of forget about the spying stuff and look at it from a kind of trade fairness angle. Huawei still has much more access to Europe than the European vendors ever had to China, even back in the days when Ericsson was going on about, we've got about 10% of the market. Yeah. And what's happened is, and if you believe what Nokia was saying in Oulu, as it's pronounced, I think, last year, they're slowly being driven out of China, and there will come a point where they have no presence in China at all, and it's already down at 3%. That's a massive protected market where Huawei has a guaranteed scale business.
So why shouldn't we return the fucking favour?
Yeah, why shouldn't we return the favour? But even if you want to get away from the tit for tat of it, like we should rise above this, Huawei's ability to tap into that scale allows it to then go into other regions of the world and price things at a much more competitive level than it would ever be able to do.
And then there's the rumours about whether or not their credit terms are suspiciously generous.
But even if you discount that, and even if you discount all the stuff about dumping and all this sort of stuff, and that sort of the fact that they have this enormous market to draw on gives them, in a market where scale is hugely important in terms of driving down the cost that you can sell your stuff for, gives them an enormous advantage that Ericsson and Nokia cannot possibly hope to replicate in their domestic markets. And they're in a market where it's open and they're competing against a company that's putting price pressure on them. One scenario that GSMA completely seems to have failed to consider is we've lost several companies over the last few years from the radio access network market, partly because of competition from Chinese vendors that you could argue is unfair because we're not given access to their market. Yeah. And because of that protected market, it enables them to price things at this level. What about the possibility of Nokia disappearing from the market, one of your own companies? And then what would happen to pricing? Would Huawei then be quite as generous as it has been?
Point.
So I personally thought the whole report was
seem to only be looking at one side of the fucking argument.
I just thought it was a very, very strange report for them to put out.
So I've got to give, we mentioned Strandy a couple of times. I've got to give a shout out to his very extensive report that he sent out within seconds. He obviously had it teed up. I thought, as soon as I read it, the first thing I thought is, I bet Strandy's fucking going purple over this shit.
Yeah.
And it's, so I've said it when he was on the pod. I recommend people sign up because it's free. Fact check, GSMA intelligence report, Yeah, it doesn't even come up with a nasty headline. He just calls it a fact check. But obviously, as you'd expect, his fact check is to mainly say in much more elevated terms they're talking shit. But then he goes into quite a lot of detail as to why.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, a couple of other things I'll say when you were talking about trade. It's a slight tangent. I know we've got to wrap up. But there was a recent fuss where we decided to renationalise what's left of the UK steel industry. And in so doing, we had to nick it off this Chinese company that had bought it, albeit for fuck all, a few years ago. And then China had a little hissy fit about it and went, we're not going to forget this.
Yeah.
And I believe
them.
Yeah, I believe them. But the thing is, you got to be careful. If we want to do business with China, which is the other massive global market apart from the US and the EU that we want to do business with, we can't just go around going, yeah, we still want you to buy our Beamers and wherever the fuck the UK produces, drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
But we're going to shit on your companies. It doesn't work that way.
No.
And the problem with all protectionism is it becomes this self-reinforcing reciprocal spiral where everyone just is retaliating the whole time.
Yeah. I find that one of the most compelling cases in all this. And I know John's made this for a long time about this issue about access to China, because the security stuff, we don't really know. Yeah. And I think a few years ago,
sorry to butt in. My point here is slightly, slightly in favour of GSMA and slightly against sanctioning Huawei for that reason. Carry on. I just want.
Well, I was going to say, if you're going to take that position that we'll rise above it and we'll take a more sort of moralistic and principled and conciliatory stance, then, as I say, the ramifications potentially are that you're allowing a foreign company with a huge advantage in its domestic market, which is protected, to compete unfairly against your own vendors, and then they might go out of business.
And,
so that's
they're not returning the favour.
There.
This is the awful part about it. It's all a game of chicken, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but I don't like any of it. I'd rather that I'm very much for free trade and let's not have any of this. This is one of the reasons I don't like Trump with the whole tariff stuff.
He's trying that again now.
Of course he is. That'll be ongoing for the next 2.5 years. I mean,
one last thought, and I'll give you the final word. But one last thought. The best argument I ever got from John, who we've had lots of chats on this subject, lots of to and fro, in favour of banning them, isn't that they're spying on us now. Isn't that they've got little back doors where they can just flick a switch and suddenly we're going back to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
Is that if we view them, and this is a big if, as a geopolitical adversary, there could come a time where things get hotter.
Yeah.
And with everything being permanently connected and permanently software upgraded and over the air and all that sort of thing, if they just, the least they could do is just like, right, no more fucking upgrades for you, no more updates on the software and your kit. And that was the one argument that when I was arguing a toss with John about this, where I was like, yeah, fair enough. I've got no pushback on that one.
Yeah, no, I find that very compelling, to be honest.
But I still, like you, I think it's a shame that we have to frame things that way, but maybe we're just naive little hippies.
Yeah, well, the world's changed. So if you think about the sort of David Cameron days, and it's not that long ago, it's only pre-2016, yeah, obviously, when he was going out in a pub, not a pub that I've been to a few times, on a walk around that area, which isn't that far from where I'm from, with Xi Jinping, getting a pint of bitter and all of a sudden it was like, we welcome Chinese investment.
Yeah.
And you saw what Huawei did during the 4G era. Look at all the problems Ericsson had in terms of loss of market share and all the concerns about it.
And there may well have been some shenanigans there.
Yeah. And
in terms of like IP theft and that sort
totally. But it's remarkable how things have changed since then. It's like the relationship between, remember the days of George W. Bush and Putin, when he came over to the White House and they were all matey and he seemed like the guy you wanted in charge in Russia. And you look at it now, it's
the problem. Politicians need bogeymen. They need adversaries.
Yeah.
And, I won't go down this tangent much at all now, but one of the politically expedient reasons for it is it distracts your populace from how much you're fucking things up internally.
Yeah.
By going, no, but look at those baddies over there.
Yeah, totally.
All right, shall we call it a day on that? We may, again, This is involving a guest, so I never want to pre-announce a guest in case it doesn't happen. But we've got another big gap after this because Pierre's going off to Venezuela. We're all such cosmopolitan people, aren't we? Mm-hmm. Except I don't get to go to where my wife's from because it's Iran. I mean, it was never a good idea. It's a particularly shit idea right now.
Yeah.
So Pierre's going to go off there for most of August, as is his French way. As far as French people are concerned, August is for chilling.
Yeah.
But we might get one more in, which I'll publish a week after this one, hopefully, that we'll record tomorrow. So there we are. So I'll just say thanks a lot for listening, and make sure you join us for that one.